What if Naruto got a new life? The Ultimate Multiverse Family. Part 4. Konan entertained herself somewhat, granting Sasori the task of using his technique to carry away the wooden pieces and carefully stack them in another room. There was no need for them until someone was available to turn them into targets, and something about the look on his face the first time was, well. He looked totally unlike himself as he used 2 hands to carry them all away at once. That should have been disturbing. Seeing Sasori happy should have been quite a bad sign as far as her subconscious was concerned. As she wondered about why it was not, Konan realized that she had never seen Sasori happy before under any circumstance, threatening or otherwise. What had changed? Naturally, everyone else had near instantly turned their eyes to look at her, creating a feeling like she had lasers aimed at her and ready to burn. Quickly, she assessed the proper environment for their skills. She was aware of some of the elemental jutsus that Kakuzu and Kisame used, best performed outside. Deidara did not have any clay with him and would need to get some before he could do anything. She did not know the hand signs for the fire-style jutsu Itachi could use. He had been a genjutsu specialist for his entire time in the Akatsuki. That could be done indoors. She knew all of Yahiko's jutsu inside and out, and was sure Nagato would be willing to tell him how to use them. Nagato himself would need instruction in the many, many other things he could do. She decided to leave him for last. Itachi, Konan began. It would be simple to show him what he could do, now, as they stood inside. Have you activated the Sharingan yet? Itachi nodded and did so, the 3 tomos spinning into place. Yes. I have also unlocked them further, into the other design. Konan wondered how he could have known to do that. The Mangekyo Sharingan. Good. It is the Mangekyo that your original used to cast his strongest techniques. Activate it now. Itachi did so, the feeling of chakra burning behind his eyes returning. Had she confirmed his eyes themselves could use jutsu? Konan wondered just how much she should explain of the how and why his jutsu worked. She could still feel the eager stares of the onlookers glancing between her and Itachi. It seemed that for her own safety, she'd better hold off on that until later. Do you have a sense of your chakra? Yes. It feels as if I can project it out of my eyes. Konan paused. This would be the hard part. There was nothing a trained ninja was as bad at explaining as how to use chakra. It was as impossible to teach as how to walk. Good. Now, do that. Project it at me. I will not raise any defense. Itachi narrowed his eyes, pushing around the chakra near his eyes as he figured out how to control it. But there was nothing he could do. If his original had been able to do this, he could only hope muscle memory would take care of it. He closed his eyes and gathered chakra in the area. Then he opened them suddenly as if his eyelids were propelled by a spring. He purposefully suppressed the urge to flail around as his chakra twisted and organized itself strangely. Luckily for him, it took no more effort than suppressing the urge to flail around during a short fall. Before he had time to see it, the environment around Konan and himself faded to darkness. The plain whitish halls were now bathed in shadows, were the shadows. Conan's dark outfit now appeared to be mostly white. Even though they were still inside, red moonlight shone from somewhere above. Konan nodded. Do not dispel this technique just yet, Itachi, she ordered. You can control the flow of time inside this technique, Tsukiyomi, so it will appear as if only a moment has passed no matter how long we experience it. If you have any questions about how this works or what it is, we have all the time in the world. Itachi realized this had the potential to be the most useful jutsu of them all if properly used. And yes, he did have many questions. They sat and discussed at length the nature of genjutsu, the nature of the Sharingan, the Mangekyo Sharingan, and for a short time he even convinced her to elaborate on his family as it was necessary during the course of telling him about the other things that she mentioned his clan in passing. He was quite sure that his ability to shorten the amount of time that passed in this genjutsu reached its limit as she told him of the massacre. My parents, my cousins, uncle and auntie, at least Sasuke survived. How could I have done that to him? Murder. My original was a cold-blooded murderer. Conan's ability to speak was distorted by the time freeze. She watched with detached curiosity as Itachi realized who he had been. Out of the corner of her eye, Conan saw the ground begin to flow past. She looked in all directions, even standing up to look behind Itachi. The open-ceilinged room they were in was changing, flowing together until it seemed to be part of a different building. It didn't take a genius to figure out what this new building might be. She might have been curious about what this version of Itachi's past had looked like, but not that curious. Before taking action, though, she did pause to see how the scene change would proceed. Was he really as much of a ninja as he had seemed to be before? The transparent room slowed in its flowing together and paused, muddled and confused. At her feet Itachi took a deep shuddering breath, shook his head. He ground his nails into his palms, focusing his energy on thinking about anything else and keeping his chakra still. Conan realized she had forgotten to mention something important about the nature of chakra too late to stop what was about to happen. Before she could move her illusory body, the red moon dimmed and collapsed, and the ground fell into darkness. For some time she was paralyzed, or felt like it in the absence of any indication she was moving. Then the darkness abruptly lifted, and once more she and Itachi stood facing each other. Itachi sensed he was no longer sitting and opened his eyes. He seemed surprised to be back in the real world. He looked at Conan for answers. With as neutral a voice as she could manage, Conan told him, "Well done." A shinobi who specializes in genjutsu must have good mental control. Without it, a genjutsu can quickly spin out of control and fail. However, you must remember that chakra is like blood. It is always meant to be flowing. Keeping chakra from flowing is actually a common way to break out of a genjutsu. What you meant to do was keep your chakra flowing steadily in the same way. Remember that. Itachi nodded, an acknowledgement she returned only very quickly before turning to the rest of them. Deidara, you will need clay before you can do anything. Everyone else, jutsus are better practiced outside. Come. For Kakuzu's demonstration, she led them to the very small area of open grass behind the building. It was about large enough for all of them to gather sitting without being excessively close to one another. But for the earth-style jutsu she was pretty sure Kakuzu could use as his native element, even a small area would be enough. She had him use a very basic earth jutsu she had learned of. All it did was cause earth to bubble up from the ground like water and turn to stone, but this astounded the easily impressed clones. They wanted to know if the techniques had names. She mentioned that they did, but she did not know the name of this particular technique. Kakuzu decided to call it Stonemaker Jutsu. He seemed to be looking at the results of his labor with focused eyes. Conan wondered what use he was thinking of for it. It was just as well that Kisame used water-style jutsu. She may not have known the exact hand signs his original had used, but she knew enough of how water-style worked to make something up. The amount of chakra he put into it was much more than he needed. His secret enthusiasm was betrayed by this, but Conan did not expect anyone else to notice as they followed the enormous wave that resulted with mouths agape. A relatively large tree, still puny by her standards, was nearly pulled out of the ground. The little stream Hidan had led them to was dry for a good 30 seconds until its source accumulated enough water to flow again, and the large tree was left at a tilt that could easily see it fall if a major storm struck anytime soon. Kisame stood staring at the soaked earth as the peanut gallery clapped quietly. Deidara did not have the material to use his techniques with. That left Yahiko as the only other one who had not yet demonstrated his abilities. Nagato walked up to Conan before everyone else was quite finished looking at the results of the wave and asked her about Yahiko's jutsu. He surmised correctly that she would not be comfortable giving instructions directly. She listened carefully, but nothing in his voice carried any hint of judgment for this. Conan supposed she should be glad he wasn't pressuring her to talk about that part of her past just yet. He listened carefully as she told him and covertly demonstrated the hand signs Yahiko would need to use, nodding. Itachi had a good idea what they were up to, as did Sasori. Kisame heard the sound of whispering and noticed, too. He understood when Nagato returned to Yahiko's side and repeated the demonstration to him. After the stream was back to half its former flow, Yahiko flushed and wondered what the technique he had been taught would do. He hoped it wouldn't have similar effects to Kisami's. That tree didn't deserve to be ripped out of the ground like that, and it might fall on an animal someday. He paid careful attention to the feeling of his chakra changing as he formed the signs. He exhaled and allowed the onlookers to boost his confidence as he made the last sign. The water exploded upwards and formed into a stream in mid-air. He had aimed at a sturdier-looking tree and tried to keep the amount of chakra used to a minimum, so the stream had only the effect of a slightly larger than usual hose as it fired itself at the trunk. Yahiko smiled when he saw the harmlessness of his technique, and how controlled and contained it was. The force of a solid stream with more water behind it would be enough to knock a large man down, easily. He turned to Nagato to celebrate. As their palms met in a high five, he wondered at the gentleness of it. Everyone else had been horrified to hear their originals described, but from the look of it, Yahiko's original had been much more like he was now. He was saddened by the memory of how Conan had described that. It probably wasn't her fault. If brutality was what her world demanded of ninjas, he had to admit he did not and probably could not ever meet that standard. But this world was different, wasn't it? Nagato was certainly proud enough. Conan stood off to the side, perhaps watching from the corner of her eye but revealing nothing. Nagato continued to stand in front of him, eyes shining with a fond look that Yahiko didn't recognize. His arms visibly trembled before folding across his chest. Yahiko smiled at him and shook his head. There were a few things about his friend that he still didn't understand and doubted he ever would. The first was that they had known each other since childhood, and yet, Nagato was still shy about overt demonstrations of friendliness. Yahiko didn't want to force anything if Nagato had some reason to be uncomfortable, but this time he felt it would be more awkward to take time to entice him into it. So with a large smile, he rushed forward, crossed the space between them, and wrapped Nagato in a strong but gentle hug. He felt a brief stiffening before Nagato relaxed into it. Why? At the edge of his vision, Conan turned her head away. Sigh, it's as if no matter what I do, she can't stand it. And, Nagato, is there some reason he's uncomfortable? Conan walked away and sat on the back stoop, carefully avoiding the bird excrement all around the handles and railings. She watched silently with no movement in her face as the group changed in configuration. There was Hidan, smirking at Nagato after he was released from the hug, then turning to Kakuzu a moment later and challenging him to see which was harder, the scythe or the stone. Kisame looked at Yahiko and nodded politely. Yahiko suggested they practice their jutsus together. Deidara looked around at the ground, wondering what clay looked like. He went over to ask Hidan. Sasori seemed to be looking at something in the air, occasionally moving his hands in front of him as if to move a piece around. Everybody else stayed clear by a few feet so as not to interrupt. Even Itachi dodged around the engineer as he walked towards Conan. Everyone else he nudged with his elbows or feet as he passed, until everyone was paying attention. They looked after Itachi as he walked up and stopped before her. The look in his eyes was calm but ready. It looked a little like Sasori had looked earlier. She decided the best move would be to stay seated. Itachi tilted his head a little from side to side, just enough to make sure he had everyone's attention before speaking. We need rules. Not hard ones, not specific directions, but there are ways in which we can and cannot be treated. These need to be made clear, Itachi announced. To begin with, what is it you expect of us? Cannot be treated, or refuse to. Is he bringing a problem to my attention, or challenging my authority? Conan tried to figure out what he was aiming for, and what combination of firmness and softness she should bring. She wasn't unfamiliar with the concept of subordinates talking back. They were criminals. Almost everyone in the Akatsuki had spoken out of turn at several points. But these versions of them seemed much more normal. Then why was he confronting her like this? Perhaps they are still themselves enough that I need to prove myself to have any kind of authority. Well, then, I expect a lot of you to get along without any significant infighting. I expect you to be prepared whenever I should ask for assistance, and keep your eyes and ears open for any problems I don't know about. Hidan, I expect you to keep us reliably informed, which means you should spend as much time as you need searching your memory for anything you haven't already told us that could be important. I don't care how hard that is, do it. I expect you all to be useful, practice your skills, and strengthen your teamwork if you need to. I expect you all to be capable of meeting any threat. Should be just mild enough for them to agree to. Itachi nodded. Those are things we can do. However, I do not expect that as the full list, nor is it very specific as to how you want us to do and be those things. I will tell you what we cannot and will not do. If any of those things you listed can't be accomplished in the way you thought of them being accomplished, revise your methodology. The list of things we cannot be includes everything you implied in the earlier description of our originals, abilities. Even now, you talk of threats and enemies. We do not think of the world in terms of enemies and threats. We may not expect a stranger to always offer assistance, we may be wary, but that doesn't change the fact that our mindset regarding other people leans much more to the friendly stranger side. We will not allow someone who is legitimately a danger to attack, but neither will we be nearly as cautious as you seem to expect. Even the most paranoid person here will not behave in a hostile way or expect others to without reason. If we don't act the way you want, that's why. The list of things we flat out refuse to be includes certain things you alluded to when describing our abilities. All but the most disturbed would agree that murder, excessive destruction of property, desecration of dead bodies, torture, and a host of other things are morally wrong. I do not mean any offense. I am sure your morals are perfectly acceptable by the standards you are used to. But this world has a much different standard of acceptable, a standard different enough that the killing of a strong person which you praise is to us a terrible thing that no sane person should even wish to speak of. We are not weak, if it should be necessary, but we have much stronger taboos against causing harm than you do, and it will not be at all easy or natural or something we get over quickly. We will not use some of the abhorrent jutsus you described, we will not agree with you or think the way you do, and we will feel morally justified in refusing to do actions which fall under those categories. Do not ask us to cross moral boundaries lightly. I predict a lot of misunderstandings, frustration, and conflict could easily arise from misunderstanding where our moral boundaries are. That was made obvious earlier. In return for your demands, what we demand of you is that you try to understand us. It may not be easy, but our preference in this part of this world is a leader we can like or at least respect on a personal level. Expecting us to be like our originals is a waste of time and we will treat it as such. Itachi then inclined his head as he had noticed she did, correctly thinking that it was a sign of respect. His voice was a mixture of multiple things, none of them matching with his words. Conan tried to combine the two in her head and found she could not. For the first time she was reduced to looking at him incredulously. On the one hand, he said this was his way of solving a potential problem. On the other hand, his words can best be summarized as, we reserve the exclusive right to do whatever we want and not listen to you off. Back to the first hand, all his body language and tone of voice is highly respectful. Back to the other hand, he and everyone else will judge my behavior and morals and tell me how I fail to live up to their standards to my face. Is this their version of respect? And they expect me to understand, perhaps even practice it. Such polite rudeness would be a good reason to weaken ties with an ally at least, if not sever them. Part of the duties of any shinobi ranked above genin is to negotiate with enemies, at least sometimes. They do not make good shinobi. Hidan moved to stand to the side, looking between her and Itachi. Dude, I can feel the respect dropping like a rock. And I'm also a little mad. I have no clue what it was that you said or how you said it, but that was rude as shit. Itachi blinked at him. My intent was only to describe and explain the consequences of certain expectations in as close to a factual, objective way as I can. I did not intend to be rude. Hidan shrugged. He could feel things, but he couldn't read minds to tell the reason why. Conan wanted to take this opportunity to be rude in response anyway. You ask to reserve the right to refuse orders and do whatever you want, apparently feel that permitting enemies to act unchecked is more important than stopping them, at the same time excuse this by claiming you are unable to stop those who would like to do harm, issue demands to me as if you've completely forgotten who is where, and reserve the right to judge me, my actions, and my very thoughts as if they are somehow appropriate things for you to be concerned with. You ask me to understand the utter lack of respect or appropriate treatment that the standards of this world permit. Then stop speaking such hypocritical statements as, we prefer a leader we can respect. Respect means that a subordinate will do as he is told. Clearly you have none. Itachi actually found himself at a loss for words, his mouth hanging open. He had made the mistake of thinking that just because her standards were lower in one area, they would be lower in general. That was a bad mistake to make. Humans are always more paradoxical than that. Well, actually, it is considered respectful to point out someone's flaws. This is a way to indicate that you believe they are strong and capable of growing and becoming better people, a way to help them do so. If one of us were to leave someone alone, allow them to continue making mistakes, it would be a sign that we believed they were unable to change and were not strong enough to overcome their flaws and fix their mistakes. The only reason to refuse to tell someone what they are doing wrong is that it would be a wasted effort. I don't think you are so weak that you cannot change your expectations or actions to be more effective. That did make a kind of logical sense, actually. Conan stared at him, now aware that Itachi was really as confused as she was. And why is it your business to try to correct the way I do my job? Hidan piped up. Did you not hear the part about friendly strangers? Helping someone who obviously needs it is everyone's business as long as they're in the same group. If it's like family shit they need help with, anyone who's part of the family can try to help. If it's shit where someone is physically injured or something like that where pretty much everyone in this culture, so like a whole country or so, can agree physically hurting people is bad, then anyone in the country could help, even if you don't know them, and probably a stranger from another country too as long as they have the same morals. Your job is shit having to do with the Akatsuki, so since we're all considered part of that group we're all able to help you with that. Just because you're in a different part of the group doesn't change shit. As long as the problem is something affecting us, we get to try and change it. Conan now stared at him. A different part of the group. As if she was just over to the side. No barrier. Was that really how? She stood up, looked around with all the self-awareness of a coma patient. Everyone her gaze crossed seemed to understand perfectly and nodded. Yahiko brightened and tried to look her in the eye but she instinctively deflected down to the ground. Now that he was done speaking from what he himself believed, Hidan scratched his head confused. Now that he thought about it, aside from that night they had spent talking just the two of them together and their first meeting where it had also been just the two of them for a wonderful moment, he always felt kind of a space between them. Considering his own personal attitudes called for even less space than people of this world normally had, his mind was seriously reaching to feel like that. Woof. He groaned. You know, my job is to walk up to people and know them like a therapist or a friend or some shit even if they didn't hire me and I've never seen them for a second before. Headache City. You look like a awesome lady, so, well I guess I kinda want to do the same thing, only for real in a long time and shit. So probably you should get used to no space. Nasty burrowing termites, I have better things to be thinking about. Let's just get this the over with. Nagato filed that away as weight, he does that for a living. Kakuzu was forced to reevaluate his longtime associate. He'd known of Hidan's activities, but had always written them off as a compulsion before. Clever little bastard. He makes better use of his talents than I thought. Yahiko smiled in a way that, unnoticed to him, always caused Nagato to get that strange fond look in his eyes. I trust him. He is trusted. It's perfect. I couldn't have left my job to anyone better. Conan nodded and reached out to pat Hidan on the head. Of course you don't do anything the appropriate way. I do not believe your original was even entirely human. You're not like everyone else. It's okay for you to act strange. But, her eyes flicked to the side again. If it was meant kindly, I suppose I should put in some effort, shouldn't I? Hidan fought to open his eyes fully even as she continued petting him. Yeah, please, oh yes please, more by the ear, oh yeah, please do. I have looking at all my memories to get to, sounds like a super headache. Oh yes there. His mumbling degenerated into deep purring. If not for that, Conan realized that his mumbles of pleasure might have sounded distinctly to anyone who didn't know Hidan. That is not. No. She took her hand away and grabbed his arm to lead him inside. Hidan reluctantly stumbled after her, looking disappointed. Most of the assembled group was faintly amused. Nagato realized the true reason why she dragged him away and agreed wholeheartedly. Yahiko wondered why petting a person-shaped cat would be something anyone would need to hide and was still confused. He chalked it up to cultural differences. Itachi's face was hidden by his palm. I should have seen this coming. Kisame snorted and asked, how? You couldn't have known a lady who talks about murder like it's a game would get so bent out of shape over rudeness, even if you had predicted she'd think it was rude. Itachi shook his head, hand still in place over his eyes. No, that's not it. I was only looking at this from one viewpoint, ours. I should have thought that she must have some reason for her actions. Yahiko was still elated. Well, she agreed, right. That's all we wanted. I'd really like to get to practicing and other things, hopefully that'll help us understand her better. Maybe now that she understands it's a kind thing to do, she'll tell me what I'm doing wrong. Perhaps not. I don't know exactly what's going on, but I don't think we can do very much. Yahiko sighed. Nagato, do you really think so badly about her? No, but I do think that maybe, I just don't think you are doing anything wrong. But, why would she hate me if I haven't done anything? Kakuzu rolled his eyes. She liked Hidan when we first met her in the bar, and he hadn't done anything either. It's probably something your original did. Yahiko looked wounded. But, my abilities, they aren't. Nagato put a firm hand on his shoulder. It doesn't matter. Just keep being you, and she'll learn to tell the difference eventually. Everything's going to be okay. Wow, you guys are really bad at coming up with solutions to social things like this, Sasori said with an audible smirk. Itachi's hand fell away from his face. Enlighten us. Sasori flinched, just a little. Or, I guess, things like this are hard for everyone. No need to get so fluffed up about it. Geez. Deidara jabbed Sasori in the ribs. Come on, Sasori, I need to go ask a man about some clay, and there's got to be some kind of space you could build things in around here, yeah. This place has everything. Maybe if she likes Hidan, petting him could make her feel better, Yahiko decided. Could you guys hold off for a few minutes? Kakuzu sighed and sat on a fallen log at the edge of the trees. Fine with me. It's about time we took a few minutes to have some peace and quiet around here. Kisame nodded, already committed to enjoying his peace. Hidan lay sprawled on his belly across Conan's bed. He had lain across the short way, so his legs fell off the other side. Even so, he luxuriated in absolute contentment, and his muscles had the look of flesh that has been worked in precisely the right way. Conan sat in front of him, her right arm tracing the bottom of his hairline. In the occasional moments when his rolled-up eyes would glance at her, they shared a look of pleasure. He was much too relaxed for sustained rumbling, but every so often as he turned his head for an easier reach he would let out a dusky purr. If it weren't for the fact that it was utterly impossible to imagine Conan ever not wearing that impressive-looking cloak, Deidara and Sasori might have thought something had happened in the 5 minutes they had agreed to wait. Conan's hand dropped away as she heard them coming and stood up to resume her business, but Hidan continued to sprawl. He looked up lazily as Deidara explained why they were there. Even the excitement radiating from him and, to a lesser extent, from Sasori could not disturb Hidan's contented mood. He worked his jaw from side to side a few seconds before Deidara finished asking the two questions he had, so he would be able to answer immediately. He told Day that there was good clay around a pretty major river to the northeast, not far, and told Sasori of the little shed hidden around the far side of the hotel with enough space for a small vehicle. They thanked him and left in high spirits, Sasori silently looking between him and Conan and covertly giving a thumbs up. Conan left the door open, but there was no indication of anyone else wanting her or Hidan. She stepped back and turned to look at him, almost embarrassed by Hidan's appearance. She consoled herself by not regretting his happiness in the slightest. He looked up at her and smiled in a much cuter way than usual, a shy little smile that turned up the corners of his mouth, one just barely higher than the other. Belly rubs. Conan would have liked nothing more than to give him a thorough belly rub. Yet, she stayed standing. Hidan felt a little emptiness inside him. Other me, where the have you gone? He stretched his ears and yawned, moving on. Where were we again? Some in exploring, right? Conan nodded. Yes. I need to speak with Itachi some more. Such attitudes may work well in this world, but I have a feeling about this particular part of this world. In this small part of it, ninjas exist. That alone is a reason to take up caution. I refuse to give up mine, whatever that means for their view of me. Come. Hidan pushed himself up on the bed slowly. Fine. What about clothes, though? Conan considered. Everyone else is here together and knows at least one ability of theirs. We do not have any enemies right now. Take all things together, and I believe we have time to go into town and visit a tailor if you wish to get a cloak like this as soon as possible. Hidan pushed himself all the way up and shook himself, grinning. Oh yeah, this is urgent shit. We can always take care of the basement people later, but it takes time to get clothes. He hopped off the bed and bounced as he ran over. Yes, please. Conan smiled, and they left. As they walked down the road between the lived-in houses that led to town, Conan sighed. Hidan heard this and jogged to catch up with her, abandoning the butterfly he had been staring at. What's wrong? Conan pointed with her chin at the trees between some houses they passed. In my world, ninja commonly travel through the trees, or on other tall structures. In this world, the trees have branches that are too small and closely crowded to make this possible, and these houses belong to civilians that would be frightened. I've always taken such a basic part of shinobi life for granted. It never occurred to me to think of being unable to travel freely. Hidan looked at the trees he could see behind the houses and tried to picture it. Bigger branches, less of them, huh? What are the trees like in your world? This is pretty normal for us. I'm not a botanist, but some basic things are common knowledge. Trees take about 3 years to grow to this size. If undisturbed for a decade, they get much larger than this. As each branch expands, it's easy to see how not all of them can remain since they are so close to each other now. Branches that are useful now will be badly placed to weather a storm as the tree gets taller and break off. By the time a tree gets to 15 years old, the lower branches are thick and sparse enough for a human to travel. Give it a few more decades, like trees deep in the forest get, and there won't be any lower branches remaining. The upper branches will be easily thick enough for a human to stand on without attaching himself to the wood with chakra, and sparse enough for travel. When traveling this way through the deep forest, a ninja is fairly isolated between the canopy above and the leaves of shorter trees below. Travel speed is, 1.5 times the speed of a horse at full gallop, and if one should fall it is a long, long way to the ground. That doesn't matter because the only ninjas that would be sent on missions so far from their village would be very experienced ones that almost never have a traveling accident unless they are very ill. Hidan stared. Conan blinked away her visions of her old world, how could nostalgia set in so quickly, and glanced at him. What's wrong? Hidan continued staring as they walked. Pretty sure these trees are a decade or so. Sure as shit they're not only 3 years old. That one, He pointed to a tree with a few lower branches that were thick enough to stand on, but still close enough to others that one would have to crouch, that one's almost certainly, like, a couple decades. Trees don't grow that fast. Conan took a closer look at the tree he indicated. It was a nicely sized 7-year-old in her experience. That is the result of decades of growth. Yeah, wood is some dense shit. I've heard that it takes some time to get it, but wood can be as strong as steel. You take a hacksaw to the ends of those twigs, and it'll still be a good several saws before they come off. Stubborn bastards. But yeah, there's no way a material as strong as that would be grown fast. That's probably why we got steel, it's faster to make. There is no possible way that can be true. If you can exert enough force to lift a grown human and throw him at a wooden wall in the first place, that is enough force to throw him through the wall. Wood is not that strong. Like shit it isn't. If a person goes running up to a wall, you know what's going to happen. They get knocked on their ass, break their nose if they weren't going fast enough to break their head, and get laughed at. Only cartoon characters, fictional ones that people draw doing funny things for kids to laugh at, only those guys can go through a wall without hurting themselves. I've tripped and fallen against the wall of that bar you met us at before. The doctors had to do a scan to tell if I had a concussion or not. You are telling the truth about this? Sure as shit. Conan fell silent and stared at small cracks in the street as it passed under her. It might be possible, she supposed. It was known that paper made from the wood of trees that were carefully cultivated with chakra exhibited unusual properties if chakra was run through it. It was no mystery that chakra could change the properties of wood. Possibly, not having any in this world affected the way trees usually grew. But Conan could not make sense of the way not having chakra changed tree growth in this world. Hidan. Yep. The only difference between our worlds that is likely to have caused this is the presence of chakra. There is chakra present in my world, and it does freely circulate through the environment and all living things, so trees would have access to it. However, chakra is commonly used in taijutsu and other forms of physical exercise to enhance the strength of muscles. It qualifies as another form of energy to draw from on top of the normal chemical energy of food, so it makes perfect sense that chakra has the power to enhance organic tissues. But what you've described is the opposite. Trees somehow produce weaker wood in a world where chakra exists. How is that possible? Hidan did a double take. Wow. That is completely different from what I was thinking. What were you thinking? Hidan scratched his head. Do trees start producing seeds and baby trees when they're about this size in your world? Conan nodded. Oh, that makes perfect sense then, because since chakra is a thing in your world and it makes muscles stronger, then you need more baby trees and they can do that when they grow faster. Conan considered his words. They made no sense now, but she was sure they would when he gave her the slower explanation. Slower? Hidan. You need to explain things slower. Oh, well, when you have little plants or tiny animals that are really weak and die fast, they also have babies really fast so their species doesn't die out and shit. If you die a lot, you need to have a lot of babies before you do. So, I was thinking that it makes a lot of sense because in your world chakra lets you use all kinds of super dangerous jutsus and shit that can kill trees really easily, so maybe since your world is more dangerous for them they evolved to grow faster to have babies faster. Kisami's jutsu still came these close to uprooting a pretty big tree, so it's not like being stronger helps our trees resist being killed that much. So you think the benefits of chakra strengthening a tree's tissues are outweighed by the increased danger from animals being more destructive, so the presence of chakra is actually bad for a tree's survival in the long run. Yeah, so they go the Kakuzu route instead. Conan held up a hand as she turned to face Hidan. Do not tell me what that meant. I want to see how well I know you. Hidan grinned. After such thorough petting earlier, there was no way this awesome lady could possibly get it wrong. He started counting in his head so he could see how long it took her. I think you could have substituted Kakuzu's name in that sentence with, Chipass. Hidan let out a sustained squeaking sound. Less than 5 seconds. Oh shit, I think I love her. There was no one around this time, so he threw caution to the wind and hugged her. Pet me. Give me orders. And occasionally treats. Love me. Conan let him hold her. Even before seeing the look in his eyes, she did not have a strong desire to do otherwise. Now, she would have destroyed all her most valued possessions to avoid doing so. She was also not psychic, but that didn't matter when he was so close. It was plainly obvious what he was thinking. Since she knew what he was thinking, she was able to decipher his mumbled demands, fueling her desire to stay here with him. After a few seconds, she wondered if her Hidan would have had the same desires, or a slightly different list. Hidan felt his train of thought sink into a swamp. As he released Conan, still grinning like a loon despite everything, he wondered. Why are we so with? Other me, where the air you? Conan. Despite everything, the conversation continued. It wasn't even very stilted. There are several other things that theory could explain, Conan murmured thoughtfully. If you were talking with a Konoha ninja in my world, it was a common occurrence for a gust of wind to blow leaves off the nearby trees during a conversation. The leaves were always green and healthy, still capable of service if they had remained attached to the tree. Now that I think about it, it does seem questionable that a tree would shed serviceable parts so quickly. What's Konoha mean? Konohagakure. The village hidden in the leaves. I have a theory that something about them is actually connected to the leaves of the trees around them. It would explain why times of strong emotion on a leaf ninja's part usually included the gust I just described. Hidan snorted. That makes perfect sense. Did any other ninjas do that? Conan had no idea. I do not know. I know about the leaves because I saw it. It was not something unusual enough for anyone to bother talking about. Konoha was the only foreign village I ever visited, so I don't know. Other major villages were named after stone, sand, clouds, things like that. It's possible. I just never saw anything. Hidan looked down at himself. What village did you come from? Conan's steps did not falter. Amegakure, the village hidden in the rain. Why? Hidan's steps did falter a little. Nothing. Ow. And what village do I come from? I believe it was called Yugakure, the village of hot water. Hidan was silent. He carefully looked back and forth along the main road before turning onto it to enter town, but continued saying nothing. Conan looked at him uneasily. His brows were drawn together, staring somewhere on the ground in front of him. It was impossible to tell what he was thinking, but she gave it a guess. Hot water isn't very impressive from a, possibly controlling elements of nature, point of view. He's probably disappointed. Probably doesn't consider it a good name. Does he like hot water at all? Given his knowledge of the forest, he might be a little jealous of the people who come from the Leaf Village. Disappointment, then, perhaps a little envy. She tugged on his hand. Hidan looked up, meeting her eyes. Let me guess. Disappointed and jealous. Hidan scowled and looked down again. Yeah, all the other villages you mentioned, they're named after big things you can find anywhere. Trees, rocks, rain, shit like that. But other me's village was named after hot water. As in, a super specific type of water that you definitely don't find everywhere. It was small, wasn't it? Conan nodded. Figured it was. That name is so small, it had to be. I don't believe this shit. I couldn't even have come from an impressive village like you or these Leaf people. Probably a rundown middle of nowhere shithole. Conan tightened her grip on his hand, squeezing it gently while she tried to think of the right words. It's all right, Hidan. Your original made it all the way to the Akatsuki, didn't he? There were only 10 of us then, which was as high as our membership ever got. There were some very high requirements for joining. We only accepted very strong ninjas, ones who could terrify entire teams of high-ranked shinobi by themselves. You made it into a very exclusive group. You deserved to be there. She let go of his hand. Best not to spoil herself too much. You were probably the most important one to come out of that village, yes. But you did. Cherish it. Hidan looked at her with renewed focus. He was silent once more as they walked together, his attention riveted on this ferocious woman who had just called him the best thing to come out of a tiny village. Nothing he could feel now felt dishonest in any way. There were so many things he wanted to say. But of them all, which was the best? Hey Conan. Yes. Quote. Conan looked at him sideways, watching patiently. His jaw moved soundlessly, opening sometimes as if he had something to say, then closing without a word. His expression relaxed, brightened, clouded, grew annoyed, then confused. It was impossible to trace or guess his thoughts in any one direction. She just stayed quiet, waited for him to come to a conclusion while she kept an eye and ear out for cars. The street was quiet today. This town did not seem to be the center of much activity, if any. They knew better than that, of course. But it was good that there was no overt danger for now. I've never had a family before. She turned, stared. Family. Before. What does he mean by that? Hidan just scratched his head. It seemed to be a nervous tick whenever he was uncertain about an interaction. Had he known he was going to say that? Or perhaps he was uncertain of her reaction. She did dislike talking about family as a matter of course. Even in the past, she had a vague idea that hers had been somehow different from the experience of others. But she'd be damned before she'd let that keep her from accepting his words, his attempt at a bond. Never before. What do you mean by that? Hidan looked back in the direction they had come from. Well, I kinda have something wrong with my memory, I guess. Kakuzu has said so, and I had to have had a family at some point, right? They turned a corner, Hidan stopping briefly and looking around to make sure of where he was first. Once he had it fixed in his mind, he moved almost on autopilot, continuing without needing a response. It's nothing major, just that Kakuzu says that sometimes I do things and don't really remember them. He's told me of things I've said that don't make any sense, to him or to me when he repeats it. Maybe it's something else, or maybe it has something to do with, well, my first memory is Kakuzu, I mean. He reached back and ran his hand along the top edge of the scythe on his back. Conan had noticed and briefly thought of questioning why he brought it with him when walking into a town of civilians. She had dismissed this with a note to ask why he was so attached to his scythe at a convenient time. Now, a new idea occurred to her. It's almost like it's a part of him. Does he even notice that he has the scythe with him now? He would probably notice more if it was not on his back. Where did he get it? My first memory ever is of seeing Kakuzu. I think I was on the side of a road somewhere and he was checking to see if I was okay. I was 8, so, I must have had a family at some point because I had to have been born, but I don't really remember. Conan, do you know anything of that? She shook her head slowly, parsing through his words. 8 years old. That really is unusual. I'm sorry. Hidan looked around, getting back to more normal business. At the last possible moment Conan thought of something. Wait. Hidan spun around to face her. Bah, I do know one thing. When your original left his village and became a missing nin, he did so in a fit of anger at the degeneracy of his village. He murdered half the village and set fires that burned down another quarter. The people that he murdered included his own parents. I mentioned it once around him. His face lit up as if he was remembering the greatest day of his life. That doesn't say anything for sure about you. Whatever led him to be happy about killing them in my world might have been just a minor problem in an otherwise healthy relationship in this one. But whatever it was, there was a problem in his family. Hidan blinked, absorbing her words. So, you think there was some shit that was unpleasant? I guess that'd kinda make sense. I never got any surge of unpleasant feelings from wondering about them, so I always figured I must have run away for some other reason. If I ran away because they were, that would suck. I always hoped my parents were at least a little cool. Conan looked at him with sympathy in her heart, a feeling she had never thought she would have for this man. At least I get to remember, and what I get to remember is mostly positive. 8 years old was how old I was when I lost them. If I couldn't even remember what I had lost, would I miss it less because I wouldn't know what I was missing, or would I miss it more because I had nothing to hold on to, not even a memory? I don't even remember what I felt when I saw his happiness at the memory of killing them. It was a jumbled mess of things. But Nagato or Yahiko, if they had seen that, most certainly would have been enraged. To take and reject what we lost before we were ready should have angered me. But we had something to miss. Could it have been justified in his case? Hidan looked up and down the street. There's the place. Oh, shit, I hope it won't take them too long to make me one. I'd have to start chewing through my arms like SpongeBob after a while. Sasori paced around the small space he had, measuring out with his feet what it would feel like to move around in, to work in. It was smaller than his workspace at the repair shop, but not by much. In fact, considering the extra room at the shop was mostly the little legroom he could just barely squeeze himself through to get behind the machines, it came out to about the same since there were no machines here. Thank God for being small-framed. As he walked around, crossing from side to side getting a feel for the space, Sasori wondered about the purpose he would put it to. Conan said my original made puppets. Remind me to ask her what century her world was in, because I can't remember when was the last time puppets were the height of technological sophistication. And he controlled them with strings, apparently. I won't deny how cool those strings are. His fingers twitched now with the memory of just how right it had felt to be moving those chakra strings earlier, but I'm going to be so far behind the times if I stick to those. I don't think anyone would say anything, but I'd be a laughingstock in my own head at least. My original's techniques are no good. Looks like I have to put the strings aside and start over. He stopped in the middle, looking around. Yes, some engineer's instinct deep in his being told him, this is a good place. He looked to the right and easily, as if the vision was gifted to him, saw his tools spread out on the little table on that side. In the back, there was an old generator. If it was still in working order, he could probably modify it to reduce the current it put out so a single machine could be safely hooked up to it. A machine, puppets. So several centuries ago. I don't know the slightest thing about robots. But really, there's no working difference between a robot and a machine aside from artificial intelligence, and since I have chakra, that's not a problem. It can work from my intelligence. There was one problem, though. The little garage was completely free of materials. Sasori began to draw up a list of what he would need in his head. I am definitely going to have to hit up someone for money. Oh well, the inventor's curse strikes again. Deidara. The river Hidan had mentioned was easy to find. For one, the trees changed as they approached the large source of water. Dei questioned why he even noticed. What? Was other me a botanist? Didn't sound like it. He could have been anything, I guess. Maybe it was a side interest or he needed to pay attention to changing plants to keep track of where he was while flying, yeah. Or maybe paying attention to things like this is just part of ninja life, yeah. Wait, I'm looking for a river so I can get clay. Other me used clay. Duh, he's obviously had to look for rivers before. Of course I'm good at this, He snorted and tapped himself sharply on the head, scolding himself. For another, the part of the river he approached made some noise, so he was able to hear its faint burbling well before he could see it. As Deidara walked toward the sound, he wondered what kind of river it was. His mind called up the image from the front cover of the version of Huckleberry Finn that he'd had to read in school. He tried to think of something else because there was no way that kind of river would make this kind of noise or be totally unknown to him, but he had nothing to replace it with so that image remained. After that mental image, the actual river was a disappointment. It was large enough to carry a person away, which was the only standard for calling something a river instead of a stream that had ever made sense to him, but only just. The sound was from where several rocks jutted out midstream, forcing the water around and over them. He didn't see any fish. Dei shook his head. He wasn't here to go fishing. He was here to look at the ground, yeah. Hopefully he would be as good at this as he was at finding the river in the first place. Deidara looked upriver. Didn't see anything that super stood out to him on the banks. He looked downriver. The dirt he could see looked its usual shade of brown. What does clay look like? Let's see. I've heard soils with clay are really bad for planting because they have small particles or something and don't hold water well. All the modeling clay I've ever seen was white. Pretty sure they have to add dyes to colored stuff like Play-Doh, yeah. So it's probably white, and soft looking. So, would small particled stuff like clay go downriver more or be dropped upriver? What was the rule for that? Crap. I hated earth science. Would have paid so much more attention if I'd known the future, yeah. After 4 minutes and several taps to the side of his head as if he could physically jog the memory free, Didera remembered. Oh my god, I am such an idiot. Small means light, which means the water can carry it farther, obviously. I shouldn't be failing at common sense so much, yeah. I know this ninja stuff is all kinds of weird, but that doesn't mean this world and its normal rules just turned off. Common sense still works, you moron. Each word was punctuated by sharp taps to his head. Grumbling, he set off downriver. Didera walked high on the bank, staying dry and looking to the side to see what he could. So far nothing. Several more minutes passed. Nothing. Yet more minutes passed. He groaned. He should have asked if Hidan knew any specific place that had clay. Well, it's not his fault. All he could do was point me here, yeah. If I didn't follow his pointing accurately or whatever, what could he do? Give me a guided tour. That was when he tripped over a root and fell, twisting to the side to avoid a stone. Unfortunately, the side he twisted to was his left, which was the side the river was on. Before he was fully, coherently aware of anything, he landed in the water with a splash. Reflexively he held his breath, but he didn't have much of it. He twisted, trying to figure out which way was up. His heart raced, making the breath situation even worse. His stomach muscles tightened to try to stop himself from inhaling. Day clawed at the water, resulting in absolutely nothing. His vision dimmed, and he tried to hold on to what breath he had. Even as his vision grew darker and his arms reached out sluggishly, a vague idea traced its way through his mind. Day opened his mouth and exhaled. In the relatively calm and steady waters, the bubble rose undisturbed. Didera watched as it drifted past his ear, rising behind him. Pushing the last of his adrenaline-based strength into his arms, he pushed himself in that direction. He lost control and inhaled just as his head broke the surface of the water, triggering a coughing fit that made spots swim before his eyes for the second time today. Puking. Drowning. Is there a god I don't know about messing with me? Yeah. He stopped coughing eventually and reached out to hold onto a solitary rock jutting out of the water as he drifted past. Holding onto that rock, that beautiful, beautiful rock, Didera laid his head down on top of it and whimpered. I didn't know I hated water before, but I hate it now, Eventually he started shivering and his arms started to burn, and Day realized he'd better swim to shore and get dry. Taking a couple big inhales to get ready, Day felt his arms become really warm. My chakra. That feels a lot better, yeah. Thank you, body. I super appreciate it, yeah. Then, judging himself to be prepared, he put his feet on either side of the rock and leapt up and away from it towards the bank. He landed on his hands, his chakra uncoiling into the water. He took no damage from the flexible surface, but was still dazed for several seconds. What the? Didera sat up, realizing as he did so that he was actually sitting on the surface of the water. He held his arms up, but lowered them slowly some seconds later as he realized he was not going to fall through. He paid careful attention and realized that his chakra was now up to something in the parts of his body that were touching the water. FML. This couldn't have happened before. Didera opened his mouth and screamed, his voice echoing through the trees. It actually felt really good. Not trusting this miraculous strengthening of the water's surface to continue if he put more pressure on it, Day spread himself out and crawled across the water toward the bank. He panted, shivering and gasping as a breeze blew across him. Suddenly tired, he sat up. Wasn't being tired when you were cold a bad sign or something? He forced himself to his feet and wandered back to the water's edge. At first he had no idea why. What are you doing, feet? I decided I hate water, right? But still he stood there, leaning against a tree and trying not to fall down or start crying. He blinked once, twice. It was after his vision clouded over and he rubbed his eyes with his sleeve, then opened them again that he realized what he was looking at. A streak of light-colored earth, smooth and gray under the water a foot in front of him. Deidara smiled just a touch hysterically. I really hate water. And still he stepped forward and sat reaching into the waterlogged ground. Hidan, I am awesome. After a great long while, but not long enough for him to start chewing his arms off, he had never had a habit of biting his fingernails anyway. Hidan now twisted, observing the flow of his very own black cloak as it swirled around his legs in the mirror. The red cloud designs highlighted the movement and encouraged further posing. Conan stood behind him, observing with a small smile. He paid her no mind as he observed the ass-kicking badass in the mirror before him. I should wear clothes more often. Conan watched as he continued examining himself in the mirror. Her small smile was bittersweet. He really did look much more handsome in the cloak than without it. But still, there was something missing. As he adjusted the collar, trying to make it flare more optimally around his hair, her eyes returned again and again to the empty space between his collarbones. Perhaps it was unconscious habit, perhaps shared preference for as little clothing as possible covering his torso, but either way the cloak was open to just the same amount as she had always observed. There was nothing else to focus on. Everything was the same, except for that space on his chest where a necklace should have been. Conan supposed she should be happy about this. They were different people. It would not be wise to equate them with their originals in her mind. She should be very happy that this Hidan had some accessory, or lack of, to distinguish him by. But the sight saddened her instead. Come, she said, turning away. You have your outfit. There is only so much a mirror can show of it. It's time to put it to the test, see how it holds up with movement, if you would like. Hidan stopped fussing with the collar and shivered. Best decision ever. Best decision, ever. This is the only possible outfit for messing with spooky things. Without it, another shiver ran down his spine, this one a genuine prelude to fear. Without it, they might actually be spooky. But now, the only thing I am at all spooked by is how awesome I am. I'm a friggin' ninja. Bring it, ghosts. He turned without a backward glance and somehow made it to the tailor's desk before Conan did, though she was well ahead of him and he hadn't been running. She had barely even had time to see him cross in front of her. With a swift, fluid and absolutely assured motion he reached for his wallet and set it down on the counter in less than a second. The tailor was startled, but quickly recovered. Ah, you are back. I take it the product is to your. How much money will you let me give you right now? Was what the tailor was able to decipher out of the jumble of syllables that seemed to tumble from his customer's mouth all at the same time. The man on the other side of the counter seemed a little crazed. His eyes were dilated more than the usual. The tailor shrugged internally. He wasn't an anatomist or anything, he had no reason to care. What he was struck dumb by was the sentence he thought he had heard. That couldn't be right. That wasn't the sort of thing anyone asked. He wondered if this customer was trying to pull something. He only wondered that for a passing thought before wondering if he had lost his mind. If not for this man, his daughter might not have made it out of her relationship with that no good, scum of the earth, devil worshipping, that boy. So he put on a smile, which wasn't very hard to do, and joked back, I do not know how much I can legally accept, sir. Up to your entire wallet, maybe. The white-haired man in his new outfit proceeded to open the wallet and extract all pieces of identification in under 3 seconds. The tailor opened his mouth to say something, he hadn't yet figured out what, but only got it half open before the man was out the door, his girlfriend having sensibly predicted he would do this and gone outside to wait already. Just as stated, the entire wallet was left behind. The tailor watched them depart faster than seemed humanly possible, hoping that his store cameras would catch the customer willingly doing this with no wrongdoing or unethical business practices involved. Cautiously, he opened the wallet. It was a good thing for his pride, he thought, that he had no other customers or employees to see his knees go weak or watch him slowly stumble to the back and sit down. The tailor had no idea of this, but Kakuzu himself wouldn't have handled the sight any better. With no prompting, Hidan spontaneously launched forward at his fastest pace. The pavement blurred beneath him. Conan instinctively moved to keep up, leaping to the roof of the buildings he ran next to and keeping up at her fastest pace. It was a pace she did not use without very good reason. This was the fastest she could travel without outpacing her body's own ability to feel tiredness. Damn, it felt good. A couple days with no training or anything had her body primed with overflowing need to move, she realized. The flashing, searing pain and heat came again, almost scorching her skin, and her eyes dilated to the point of pain. A vision of battle filled her eyes. She did not notice her pace speeding up. The concept of tiredness no longer existed. Hidan saw her begin to outpace him with her rooftop leaping. His eyes narrowed, and chakra was automatically channeled to his feet to fuel his special enhanced speed. Without needing to pay attention, Hidan stopped running and started leaping along the pavement, a strange kind of horizontal leap that propelled him at least twice as fast as Conan was racing now. At this pace he covered an entire street to the next intersection in a single one of such leaps. Corners. No problem. His chakra switched with the switchblade speed of practice from propelling to gripping, allowing him to turn literally on a dime while outracing the most modern high-speed trains. The pavement was curiously unaffected to the usual observer, the mostly horizontal direction of force causing damage of the kind that would not leave visible traces. To lower the risks even further, his chakra also spread into the pavement under each foot and steadied it so the damage was less than it should have been. Conan took to the skies. Without such a technique, there was no way she could keep up with muscular strength alone, no matter how enhanced. She recalled the wings of falcons she had studied, the better to improve her own flight with, and mimic them as best she could. Hidan continued to disappear into the distance, but at a much slower rate. After a few seconds of this he realized he had not seen her overtake him again and slowed just the small amount he needed to bring them neck and neck. As one they turned, putting the surrounding asphalt and trees to a new test. Though he sidestepped with the grace of a dancer around a child's bicycle, it blew over and tumbled into the yard of the neighboring house, smashing through the fence in the way. Windows groaned in their frames, and if any of them had had shutters before, they didn't now. One family had obviously picked the wrong time to get the roof retiled. Another family discovered the hard way that the right time to get their roof so treated was ASAP. Early leafing trees discovered their mistake as the small buds of their delayed neighbors did not catch enough of the wind to be torn off the branch. These same small buds and branches, those lucky enough not to be severed, split the edges of Conan's paper wings as she passed, affording greater maneuverability to her. She buzzed Hidan's head on his next leap. His laugh was left behind. In less time than it would have taken to speed read a transcript of all these events, they both found themselves soaring into the air in a straight vertical climb. Conan reached the peak of her climb faster as her wings had greater air resistance, and darted up at a slower speed. Hidan finished his exclamation, "Who?" as she swooped in and caught him, then lowered them both to the ground. She set them both down outside the impossibly small circle Hidan had taken off from, in front of the next building past the hotel. They had a job to do. Hidan hadn't needed to go so far up, really, but the temptation of using his chakra had been too great to resist. Something like that needs one last bang. Now that Conan thought about it, she had no idea if his original had ever learned that running out of chakra entirely was supposed to be fatal. She reminded herself he had been without immortality once, and even if he hadn't, they still taught it in any decent ninja school. She wondered if she should tell his clone now. Hidan looked up. Well, this one wasn't very impressive. It was just an old single-story building with offices in it, like a doctor's office or something. It probably wasn't haunted at all. Even so, he could not stop smiling as he pulled the door open and stepped into the dark hallway. Conan followed silently. They checked the first couple of rooms together, then split up at a fork in the hallway. Hidan narrowed his eyes in concentration, trying to monitor himself for any sudden changes in emotional state. When that didn't work, he tried something he had not done for a long time. His hands came together to form a seal that was not a seal, each of his hands resembling the devil horns, hand sign of rebellious listeners of rock music, with the two middle fingers grabbing onto the other hand and the two outer fingers meeting their alternates. His thumbs also met, and the whole gesture was nestled in close to his chest. His fingers had found this to be a comfortable arrangement when he was trying to focus, but he had not needed to focus like this for a very long time. Focused like this, Hidan walked through the branching collection of old, disused exam rooms. Almost all of the good, useful stuff was no longer present, as it shouldn't have been. There were no files in a filing room he passed. The only piece of useful equipment he could find was a large, weighty scale that probably would have been cheaper to just replace when the doctors moved to a new building. Nothing was knocked over. There was no garbage, everything was in its place, and all the doors in the building were in the same position before he used them. Most importantly, there was no change in Hidan's emotional state, at least not as far as he could tell from his body. His heartbeat slowed perfectly in accordance with stopping intense exercise, his lungs drew breath in the same pattern, there was no tingling of his spine or strange sensations in his intestines. It was boring. He retraced his steps back to the lobby where the hallways had forked. Conan was already back, the receptionist's area having been much smaller and the staff rooms unimportant. He shook his head and yawned as he returned. She nodded, and they went out the front entrance. Hidan, she asked. What? I just thought I should tell you that you should be dead by now. Dead? How? You used up all your chakra. Just think. If I hadn't been correct about you having the same abilities as your original, you could have killed yourself with a short race. Hey, Hidan smirked. If you hadn't been correct, my body would have told me it was running low in shit it needs to live, because that's what bodies do. I'd have been fine. Conan considered this claim. Damn it. I suppose you're right. Every ninja is trained to reflexively evade attacks, and your original was much too capable of not doing so when he first joined the group. He did not gain immortality very long before that, there is no way he could have trained himself out of such reflexes in that time. Hidan elbowed her. Yeah, I was right. Listen to the body knows. If I couldn't handle something, I'd have some instinct telling me. I'd know. No need to gloat. Try not to get too bored with this next one. Just another one in the crowd, is the perfect disguise for a true enemy. Stay alert. The next building had been used for a different purpose, was of a different design, and was the exact same level of haunted as the last. Hidan left with a whine. This pattern repeated all the way to the far end of the street, Conan nodding to herself after each one. Puzzlingly, she also got more and more tense as they continued. Satisfaction. Wariness. Hidan guessed the two could coexist if you expected that there had to be something wrong somewhere, but why would she expect that? Just because there hadn't been any ghosts so far didn't mean there couldn't be some by the end of the road. Hidan rubbed his hands in hopeful anticipation. It wasn't too late. He wondered if she had something against ghosts, but of course that made no sense. He looked to his side. Does the street usually look like this? Something seemed different. It seemed like he should know what, but he didn't. He bumped Conan with his elbow. She was no more tense now than she had been at any point after they left the last building, but moved her hands back into a ready position as soon as he made contact. She looked sideways at him. Does the road look funny? He asked. Conan glanced down, a strangely deep, assessing glance for something so quick. She looked forward, to her other side, even up as she answered in a low voice, no. Do you sense something? Hidan glanced behind him where she wouldn't be able to see, just in case. It just looks wrong, that's all. Conan returned to looking at the road surface. Wrong how? Hidan shrugged. I don't know. It just looks unhealthy. I never thought of how many cracks it had in it before. Now that I think about it, it's the same back home, but I never really noticed. Conan slowed to a stop and said, in a light conversational tone completely at odds with her words, I understand just what you mean. That appears to be very wrong indeed. Hidan looked up. Before his eyes, the road disintegrated. He couldn't easily remember just how cracked the road had been outside the hotel, but he thought it would explain his feeling of wrongness if it was less cracked. The road just beneath them was definitely much more cracked, he would have noticed if it had been this bad. But that was a side note compared to what was happening a foot in front of them. A foot in front of them, the cracks in the road grew blurry from being partially filled in with dust. It didn't look like anything had been crushed. The dust just seemed to flake from the surface of the asphalt itself. In fact, there were actual flakes peeling back in some places where they displaced the dust. After a few feet, the road stooped somehow as it almost seemed to sink in the ground. A small plant had tried to take advantage of this. It stood perfectly intact if wilted, every leaf and stem fiber gray. No spots, black or otherwise, interrupted its former flesh. Beyond that, a line was drawn in the ground. What was outside was ruined, as the lifeless plant showed. What was inside was just wrong. The roadside plants were mostly wilted and shriveled. The grass was interrupted by occasional patches of astroturf, looking like a bad attempt at restoring some illusion of life to this place. Farther in from the road, a tree was growing. Green it may have been, but at what cost? Its branches were stiff in the wind, their usual asymmetry and the healed scars of the thousand natural shocks that flesh should be heir to nowhere to be seen. It looked like a designed tree, done by a compulsive perfectionist. Neither of them was able to stop the natural movement of their eyes away from the road, but their peripheral vision was enough. That wasn't astroturf. Leaves from neighboring woodland had blown in, and some had clustered around the roots of the ornamental shrubs closer to the building where they could not be easily raked away. No spot or blemish disturbed their surface. It wasn't hard to guess that none ever would. The ornamental shrubs themselves were flourishing. They exploded outwards, every branch perfectly green. Every single branch. The interior was dense and dark and still green, though it would never receive light. The underside, interchangeable with the top. This was a great violation of the natural order. The building itself looked 50 years old, at least. Its outside was many muted colors, its stone skeleton showing. Whatever imitated life in the surrounding grounds could do nothing for the non-living. The best it could do was keep disintegration at bay. Not a single fragment lay in the surrounding explosion of grass, though both Hidan and Conan could practically feel the lack of structural integrity even from this far away. On a visible level, the odd colors of the stone were the only sign of disuse aside from the missing pieces, which had probably fallen before the building was claimed. It was another sense entirely that told the two shinobi that something was very, very wrong here. Conan held Hidan's hand. It was foolish to deny aid when one truly needed it. She squeezed it sharply, dragging Hidan out of his reverie. He blinked and began to give his report. I can't feel anything from here, he muttered almost under his breath. That's weird, right? Whatever it is that's messing with everything, the grass is right there, so whatever it is should be right there too. But I don't feel anything. So either the cause of this is projecting its influence this far, or it is non-sentient, Conan supplied. If it is the first, you might feel something as we approach. I would assume the cause of this is based in the building. Keep your senses open, and stop both of us the second anything changes. If the second, we're effectively dealing with a new kind of natural disaster. It could be chaotic. The procedure is the same in either case, so be alert. Hidan apologetically worked his hand out of her grip and pressed them together again. Sorry. Helps me focus. You know, it might be a better idea for you to go first. How far can you send those butterflies? Conan nodded. Far enough. Once more, sheets of paper began to fly out of her cloak and fold themselves in the air. They flew to the building with surprising speed and vanished around the corners, seeking an entrance. Conan explained, They are directed by my will and will flutter around filling a given area until locating the target, at which point one will fly back and inform me. I have no idea if they are useful without a specific target, so let's just wait a few minutes. We'll approach then, at the latest. Hidan wondered how that worked. So is some part of her in them or something? Or, since she's clearly still using jutsu, which means she's using chakra, did they connect back to her with chakra? On a mission was probably a bad time to ask, so he returned to concentrating. The trouble with that was, he couldn't anchor his concentration to anything. How am I supposed to look for something when I don't have anything to look at? He settled for sweeping all the bodily functions that usually changed when emotions did, and in between sweeps trying to think of anything important he'd seen before like she had asked. A minute in, he realized that the effort itself was changing his feelings, causing him no small frustration. He groaned and gave up, lowering his hands and looking to Conan to see if anything was going on. Anything, she whispered. I can't see anything when I look for it, he replied. The focusing is frustrating as shit. And that was after I settled for just trying to sift through my memories, which is easier than looking at everything for nothing. I just wanna go in already. Conan sighed, then stopped 2/3 of the way through. She forced herself to take a slow, silent breath as she focused on the building. There, it came again. Then, what even was that? Hidan, she barked. Something is happening to my butterflies. I can feel my chakra being severed as they are destroyed, and none are coming back to report. At least one of them is, I'm not sure. It's been taken from me. We're going in. Conan. She doubted any area of the surrounding grounds was free of influence. The patches in the grass thickened and grew together only a few meters in, and the path leading to the front entrance was no better. It looked fuzzy in a way gravel and stone should not even from here, and changed colors at random like something diseased. Even so, they had to go in. She looked up. The air did not seem changed, light passed through it normally. It would have to do. She used yet more paper to give herself wings, and picked up Hidan as she took to the air. It required spending some chakra to boost her strength, but he was on the light side. Thank gods for that. Hidan tried his best to focus as they swooped in. His first report began as they passed over the ornamental shrubs. I feel good all of a sudden, he quickly informed her. Like it's all right, and I'm cared for and watched over and shit. I'm not afraid. Conan's eyes were drawn beneath him to where little green shreds floated down to join the shed leaves at the base of the shrub. What? No, who is cutting them? She'd been too focused on the plants being changed in some unnatural way to notice the signs of a more human touch. No form of growth could have given the leaves cut edges. They swooped closer. There was a bench hidden behind some bushes near the building. It made a nice, private resting area where one could be free from noise. It would have been more appealing if Hidan hadn't commented, it's sad now. Conan flew once around the entire building, hesitant to commit to a single point of entry. As she flew next to the left side of the building, which was a solid mass of windows, Hidan waved. Who is he waving to? Conan stopped in mid-flight and hovered in the air as she prepared to turn a corner, almost losing her grip on Hidan. A white paper butterfly fluttered in one of the last windows before the corner. As she watched, it repeatedly bounced against the glass, crumpling its leading edges as it tried to get out. Conan wondered if it was trying to report, but with Hidan in her hands she could do nothing. Hidan, get a kunai and, the butterfly's wings spasmed like the heartbeat of a cardiac arrest victim, failing to keep it up in the air. It went completely still and drifted to the floor, out of sight. Conan continued her survey of the entire building, slowing to the point where Hidan asked her why she was going so slow. Her response was short and quiet, simple statements. The loss of her scouting jutsu was continuing. The one butterfly in the window demonstrated that at least some of the loss was unnatural, like nothing she had ever before experienced. That meant the situation was unknown and extremely dangerous, which meant they had to take extra care to gather information before entering harm's way. If they went in with no information, it would be tantamount to committing suicide. Hidan went quiet at this argument. He could find nothing wrong with it. Everything she said made perfect sense. Yet, well, she wasn't the type to go off hunches anyway, so he kept his mouth shut. No more anomalous incidents happened, no more frightening sights were presented to them. Conan ground her teeth together just a little. Where had that thought come from? Presented. I have no reason to believe there is anyone in the building trying to frighten me. The room was empty. Hidan has detected no malicious intent. Unless, there were the plants to consider. Unless I'm willing to believe that we are about to walk into a ruined environment to confront a god. Am I willing to believe that? Hidan looked up, concerned. You okay? You picking up anything? This feels super shitty. Are we going to die? I can't think. No, Conan thought, but you can feel. Hidan was right. At least part of the reason for slowing down was that her ability to process information was failing. Her hands had been painfully tight under Hidan's arms ever since she had seen the butterfly, but that sight had only accelerated the process. Conan had no idea why, but her bodily processes were rapidly becoming more and more disordered. Her chakra threatened to break, her heartbeat pounded chaotically, and it was becoming harder and harder even to control her thoughts. She was briefly jealous that Hidan's ability was picking up only benign feelings, that it was protecting him. She had no such shield. Her wings beat fiercely, and Conan was startled to see a wall backing away from them. When had she? She shook her head, made a deliberate effort to refocus her eyes. This effort was interrupted by a sudden jolt, and she pulled all her chakra together to keep them out of free fall. This close and in physical contact, no amount of shielding could protect Hidan. His entire body started to shake, and she almost dropped him. At the last second she dodged left to avoid impaling him on a branch of a wrong tree. Hidan froze and started to whine at such a high pitch that she would have covered her ears in any other situation. Conan looked around, the environment swimming. Nothing was describable, nothing looked right. She made out a quick line of gray and urged every muscle in her body to head for it. Get away from here. I need to get away from here. Out, away. There's the road. Go there. We're going to die and fall and die and crumble and turn gray and zzjjhhss. The fear lifted. Her eyes flew open and for just a moment took in the world before her. It was a sea of wrong grass. Hidan lay some distance away, wiggling around on the ground to make sense of his surroundings, trying to sit up. Conan realized they were still in enemy territory. Panic while flying is bad. I can't feel my chakra. There's a non-zero possibility we will in fact die on this mission. That last thought seemed odd, as if there should be something important about it. Conan wondered what it could be. The thoughts felt as if someone was whispering them directly to her brain. She watched Hidan struggle to his feet. Her heart beat rapidly, the temperature around her too warm. Someone should turn down the air conditioning in here. I should go find someone, but when she tried to turn she couldn't. It was impossible to move. Oh, right. I'm alone. Bodies only get one occupant at a time. Wasn't that unusual? Who made that rule? She tried to move her arm, to reach out for Hidan. He was now looking around. Movies today have such stupid characters. What does he honestly think he's going to see? The villain is invisible, obviously. The empty room behind the butterfly proved that. Boo. Hiss. Her arm did move, just a little. She'd never thought about how nice it looked before. She looked down, looked at the interplay of colors over her cloak and skin and nails. It was a very artistic looking arm. The nails could stand to be a little darker, for more contrast. The ends of them were starting to chip. Someone should be taking better care of this. Suddenly her viewpoint changed, tilted. Hidan lifted her up, balancing Conan against the side of his knee. He shook her opposite shoulder as much as he could without making her fall over. Conan, we have a mission. Wake up. Right, the mission. Conan blinked, feeling her eyelids echo the movement. I should investigate the amazingness of the human body further sometime. But he's right, of course. There's a mystery to solve. She put an arm beneath herself and got to her feet. They stood together, Hidan shaking his head to ward off the effects of the sudden adrenaline withdrawal. He had a headache starting and felt rather tired. Whiplash sucked. He wanted to go home and sleep. But he hadn't come all this way for ghosts only to turn back now. He reached over to Conan and pulled her by the sleeve after him, into the building. A little residual feeling of happiness that trickled in through his sense helped, and he was well aware it would not survive actual physical contact with Conan. She did not seem to have anything useful to him. They walked into the front lobby of the building and stopped, looking around. Conan reflexively classified everything she saw. Intake desk. Portrait. Check-in, check-out forms. Staff rooms. Hallway to patient rooms. Other hallway to different patient rooms. Someone's looking through the checkout forms. That's unauthorized. I should report this to the supervisor. Someone needs to get that person assigned to a body ASAP. Floor. Hole in floor. Chairs. Something seemed like it should be important again. She traced back over her thoughts, finding nothing unusual. Maybe it was the supervisor. I actually don't have any idea how to get in contact, now that I think about it. Damn, someone needs to be doing something about this renegade. She sighed. That wasn't exactly in the job description of any bodied person, so she let it go. They would be assigned or not on their own time. She felt distinctly uncomfortable now. Something was weird and strange. What was it? She looked at Hidan, tapped him on the shoulder to get his attention. He seemed to be looking at the renegade shuffling the papers with an unreadable expression. At her touch he turned. Hidan, something's wrong, she stated. People aren't supposed to be outside their bodies. That's the rule. Someone needs to do something. If this is the sort of place that tolerates such behavior, we should not be here. Hidan looked at her in confusion. I don't see anything wrong with alternative body styles, he huffed. Why are you being so judgmental? He's not hurting anyone. I feel nothing but a little bit of sadness. If he wants to be sad, that's his own problem. Conan shook her head. But in public, Hidan bristled. What's wrong with being yourself in public? Conan shook her head. Her thoughts were speeding up. The feeling of importance was coming back. Everything around her looked different. A new label came to her. Hospital. The wrong plants. The person shuffling the papers. All of these things seemed to be much more important suddenly. She remembered the plants having been important before the crash. Her hands began to shake, but she reflexively stilled them. The butterflies were all gone by now. A lucky third of them had been destroyed. The rest were no longer hers, though she could still feel them. They moved back and forth on the upper floor. No one wants to see your most private parts, that's why, she snapped. We have a mission to accomplish. Let's go. And she dragged him over to a hidden stairwell, leaving behind the renegade searcher. Conan froze for a moment, as if she was being watched, before looking up the stairs. Several steps were missing, and several others looked ready to fall apart at any moment. It was possible that whatever held this building together would not allow the remaining stairs to collapse. But did she trust that force? No, she did not. Luckily the wall, though covered with flaking plaster, looked much more stable. Conan started forward and found the problem with this plan. Hidan, was it? You have some way to get past the missing steps. I would, if I could feel my chakra. Hidan scratched his head and tried to copy what the others had done earlier when demonstrating their jutsus. I think I can feel mine. Can I give you a ride? Conan swallowed, almost prepared to bow to him if he asked. Thank you. I will need a ride. She wiped her palms on her cloak and resisted the urge to look around frantically. It would not help. Hidan found another reason to wear clothes more often as the fabric of his cloak offered a much better grip than his bare skin would have. With her on his back, it felt just like an embrace. Especially when he started walking and her arms tightened even more over his shoulders. He wondered how to get her to hug him more often in the future, and followed her directions over to the wall. He had to put his hands on the wall to avoid losing balance as he climbed onto it, then stood up. The stairwell was thin enough that they were forced to duck. Conan's arms made an effort to relax as much as they could. She dismounted at the top, since the floor of the upper hallway was miraculously free of holes. Walking forward, she peered to her left. She no longer felt anything to guide her. Had even the stolen butterflies been destroyed? Hidan, do you see any? He was gone. The hallway was completely empty, just her and the stairwell. Conan had to stifle a cry of some high-pitched sort. She had felt nothing, not the slightest trace of wind from his movement. No sound. Her eyes jerked around, looking everywhere. Where, and just as importantly how, had he gone? Since he was to her right and she hadn't seen him, she darted down the right hallway. She paused after looking for him in the first room, and looked again. A book sat open on a desk, and in the corner were toys. New toys. The room actually looked very nice, the sheets made and everything. A few patches of plaster indicated recent minor repairs. The pillow had a depression in it, the shape of a person's head. As she watched, it changed shape, the side of the pillow in her direction becoming flatter. Conan averted her eyes and continued down the hall, walking slowly because her knees would not allow her to go any faster. Just a person. One who doesn't happen to have a body, that's all. How dare he? It's against the rules. That was what I thought before, and everything was fine. I was not in any danger. Oh gods, I need to find Hidan. Why are my knees so wobbly? The second room held a bookcase that could not have been older than a decade, if that. The third down the hall showed signs of someone looking for something in it, but no Hidan. The next room held a potted plant. It was literally all right angles, not having wasted any time pretending to be natural. Right beneath the potted plant was a couple footprints in a patch of dust, the first dust she'd seen in the entire building. They had the same general size and shape as Hidan's shoes. Conan considered the possibility that Hidan was playing some weird form of hide-and-seek with her, then slapped herself on the face with a particularly violent facepalm. I'm letting fear make me stupid. Someone is messing with me, but it's probably not Hidan. It's time for the enemy to reveal themselves. Release. Nothing changed. Her chakra settled back to its normal flow, and nothing in the environment had changed. She had not even felt as if her efforts had done anything, as if there was anything to be thrown off. If this was genjutsu, it was at least on Itachi's level. Conan wondered just why she had walked into this in the first place. An echo of a sound came from the hallway, a faint whisper of air movement. She turned and stepped out cautiously. There was nothing. No one was in the hallway, and there was no sign that anyone had ever been in the hallway. She looked behind her. The dust on the floor was gone, and the plant was all curves and drooping leaves. Conan froze, then finished her turn to go back in and search the room more thoroughly. A hand pressed into her back. With the speed of a maniac on cocaine, she whirled around and pulled out a kunai all at the same time. An empty hallway of shadows was all that greeted her eyes. The sunlight that bounced down the hall was turning gold. Behind one of the golden beams, a shadow moved. It disappeared before her arm was even fully extended, the kunai bouncing off the wall and clattering on the floor when it should not have done either. Nothing whatsoever happened for the next minute as she looked around, covering the hallway and room with her gaze. Nothing changed. The kunai lay where it had fallen, the plant drooped as much as it had before. The beams of light did not move. Only after a full minute did Conan take the risk of moving, walking slowly over to her kunai and bending to retrieve it. She was nearly knocked to her feet as a tremendous weight landed on her back, wrapping its arms and legs around her. She did scream this time, but at such a high pitch it was inaudible to human ears. She stood up with no weight on her back at all, turning in circles frantically. Again the hallway was empty. A hand patted her head, brushing against the paper flower in her hair. She reversed her spin and looked up to a blank ceiling. Slow footsteps sounded down the hallway in the direction she had come from, the quiet footsteps of someone who habitually practices stealth but does not happen to be doing so at this exact moment. It came from around a corner. She put a kunai in each hand and advanced, dreading what she would find. The sounds seemed to change as she approached, becoming a little familiar to her ears. Her chest froze at this new horror. They stopped, then changed direction, moving in a small circle. A board squeaked, a sound that felt like it pierced her heart. Conan narrowed her eyes and held up a kunai, edging to the corner silently. She peered around the corner at an angle, and dropped both kunai as waiting eyes met hers. Hey, where the were you? Wait, wasn't that the hallway I was standing near? Hidan frowned and scratched his head. I couldn't even feel you. Even when I focused. Pretty sure that's never happened. Conan received the words but did not absorb them. She walked over to Hidan and grabbed his hand, urged him, we have to get out of here right now. Hidan stared at her. He could feel her now, all the deep unsettlement she was experiencing, but did not have enough time to understand. Wah, but don't we have a? Conan brought the exact memories to the forefront of her mind, omitting only the scream. The hand on her back. The sudden weight. Hidan let out a scream that he quickly blocked by shoving his forearm in his mouth anyway. He stared at her, eyes wide. She nodded at him, pulling him back to the stairs. He did not resist at first, but stumbled as they neared the stairs. Conan looked back. He had lowered his forearm, now looking confused. He tilted his head as if sensing something she could not. What is it? She whispered urgently. Happiness, he replied. It took her a while to understand the meaning of that collection of sounds he had just made. She stared, completely failing to connect that word to their current situation in a way she could make a question out of. Hidan blinked at her, equally off balance. He at least was able to recognize the need to let go of her hand, and recovered his wits. There's a lot of happiness here, he whispered. Hope. When I touch the walls I get different feelings. It hasn't always felt like this. This is all new hope and happiness and shit. Something's better, a lot better. Whatever's here is good and shit. Conan stared at him, still unable to make connections between that and the touch she could still feel on her back. Hidan's face twisted into deep confusion and thought. So it's good, and also super wrong, and powerful, and scaring the crap out of you, but not me, and I have no idea what is going on here. His eyes widened so far she could see a neat little ring of blood vessels around the edges. Oh, my, you jerk. Hee, you rang. Between the opposing influences of the muddled mess she felt, Conan turned around at a perfectly normal speed. There, sitting on the railing around the top of the staircase, was a little boy. He appeared to be only 8 or so years old, and was smiling. Each eye lifted up in a perfectly innocent happy curve that indicated so. Her eyes traced him from top to bottom. His hair was medium length and white, hanging in bunches around his face. A clump of it hung down right between his eyes, over his nose. It was not quite long enough to touch the mask that stretched across his face, dark blue cloth covering his nose and mouth. The mask continued down his neck where it disappeared beneath his similarly dark blue, thick long-sleeved shirt. Said shirt was protected by white plates of armor covering the shoulders and running down the arms on the outside. Leather straps crisscrossed his torso in an X shape, supporting something small on his back. His pants were more of the same color. His shoes, the standard open-toe shinobi style. Conan felt her higher logic mechanisms pack up and take a vacation. She let them, they had earned it. Hidan's anger stayed but faded to his emotional background as she laughed like he had never heard before. Scratch that, it was more than clear from her personality that nobody, ever, had heard her laugh like that before. It was free. It was careless. He was very worried she was going insane. The boy stared at her, fascinated. When she eventually stopped, he clapped. She caught her breath and stared at him. You, this world, I have no idea what the hell is possible. Anything could be. I don't have any reason to believe anything's impossible anymore. She looked at Hidan, and he felt even more terrified by the look in her eyes. What's next? Hidan struggled to give an answer that wouldn't send her further over the edge. To be honest, although he had felt her earlier fear, he had no idea why the sight of the boy would have been enough to cause her to snap. He had not felt close enough to the limit of what she could handle for that. Was something else going on? Not much. I don't know what you think this kid is, but he's just a little, trust me on that one. Yeah, with some power to mess with reality, but still just a little. He turned accusingly to the boy. What the you little jerk. Last time I was aware of your existence you were messing with people in town and playing with zombies. You asked me if I would loan you my forearm. He smirked, amusement entering his voice. Did you seriously get so bored that you had to resort to taking care of people just to keep yourself entertained? How bored does that have to be? Hey, you deserve it. Hey, the boy objected. Keeping a people zoo is cool. Yeah, whatever you say. You must have been desperate. It's sustainable. Hidan still smirked at him. Yeah, it is. It's way too much responsibility for you to be demonstrating. Did something change? The boy popped down behind him from the ceiling. I still got zombies. Wanna PLAAAAAAAYYYY. His eyes were curved happily again. Conan marveled. She had not seen him move at all, yet he had gone from the railing to the ceiling. What are you? The boy was then sitting on her shoulders, his weight too light for his mass. You can call me Overflow, if you want to call me anything. I'm the local demon. Welcome. She looked up at him. I like my arm. I see no reason to give it up. He hopped down, standing beside her. What would I want with your arm? You need that to be able to do all the super cool awesome things. How would you be interesting without it? Conan tilted her head. Would you borrow my arm if I was boring? Yes. Why? Because you would be freaking out and the look on your face would be funny and I've already chewed through all the forearms in my collection. Hidan growled down at him. No, you wouldn't, because I won't let you. Stay the away from my friends. The boy looked up. I hope you have enjoyed your stay at the abandoned hospital people zoo. Please come again soon. He smiled again and evaporated. His body seemed to become shadow as he did so, Conan thought. Hidan stamped his foot in anger. He's such a little jerk. That jerk, Hidan grumbled. But I'm glad to see he's turning over a new leaf, I guess. Let's go home. They returned home under cover of darkness. The hospital grounds had already been swarming with darkness, but the road outside had a beam or two fall upon it. Before Conan finished interrogating Hidan on how he knew the demon boy, those beams were gone. Hidan paused before the door and tilted his head. He mostly felt relaxed, in the way that can lead to sleepiness, and there was only mild pressure on his eyelids. Nobody was asleep yet. He opened the door and walked inside, yawning loudly. There was a dim light down the hall. They went to investigate. Looks like someone's been making friends without me, Hidan smirked. Kukuzu looked up with patient toleration on his face as he dealt cards to everyone else at the table. I have a right to. Hidan ran back to the lobby and grabbed the comfy receptionist's chair, bringing it back to the little table in the kitchen and sitting on it backwards. I didn't know you could. How ya guys doing? What's the game? Nagato studied his cards with a deliberately blank face. It's 500 rummy. We had to use a second deck. Kukuzu's not playing, so Itachi's winning right now. Yahiko's face fell as he looked at his hand. Oh man, please tell me you guys have better news. Anything to delay my brutal death a little longer please. Hidan winced at that. It was as if his vision had changed just for a moment. He wondered what Conan saw. Yeah, as if she would tell him. He knew better than that. We found nothing dangerous on this street, except for all the way at the other end where this little I used to trip over up until the last few months has disappeared to. He's not super dangerous, like he wouldn't kill anyone, but you might want to watch out for your mind around him. Once you know to do that he's fine. He's a little kid, like 8 or so, with white hair and dark clothes and an X of leather straps on his chest. Kukuzu looked at him suspiciously from the side of his eyes. What is it with you and little kids? Hidan blew a raspberry at him. I meet interesting people in this line of existence, okay. You make it sound like I'm a pedo or something. If anything, my type's people who are older than me. Conan smacked him lightly on the back of his head, enough to get everyone's attention. Hidan. Was it? He asked while rubbing the back of his head. This is exactly the sort of thing I asked you tell me about, is it not? Huh, oh, that's searching my memories shit. What is? You didn't tell me you knew any other strange children. Hidan grumbled. Oh, shit. Okay, that's it. He turned to Kakuzu. I've been trying not to be crap at that whole remembering important things deal for all of today, and it's not working. You know all the stuff that's important enough for her to need to know now, right? You tell her. He turned back to Conan. Yeah, probably should have thought that would be important after the first kid. Wadea want to know. Conan would have thought deciding what she needed to know about this other child was something he knew how to do. You should know how to filter the unimportant from the important, Hidan. Has something changed? Poorly muffled laughter burst from several spots around the table. Itachi activated his Sharingan, wondering if that had been intentional. He found to his surprise that it was not. Hidan stuck his tongue out at them all. Then he sighed. Fine. Tell me if I'm leaving anything out. The other kid, I met 2 months ago in an alley while it was raining. He was out of the rain under some kind of awning, and I didn't notice he was there until like a minute after I got out of the rain by sitting under the other awning across from him. In my defense, he was super quiet and hidden by some cans and his outfit was all the right colors to not be super visible, okay. It was like camouflage. I got this weird feeling like I wasn't alone after a minute and looked around. I wouldn't have even seen him if I hadn't gotten that feeling. So, there he was, next to a garbage can taller than he was. And he looked sad. As soon as I started looking at him, I could feel sadness, like everything was just far away from him and he didn't know where he was or where anything was anymore. He was just looking at me kinda blank, holding his stuffed snake, just watching to see what I would do. I don't know if he expected me to do anything. So I went out into the rain in the alley and kneeled in front of him, and it felt really weird. Like we were the only people who understood how wrong everything was. I saw in the way he looked at me that he realized I understood, but he didn't say anything. He just held out his little stuffed snake. I knew that was a kinda demonstration of something, like trust or some shit, so I petted it and then he took it back. And then I got the feeling the moment was over so I left and found better shelter. The kid was toddler age or so. Like I said, the garbage can was taller than he was, he probably could have hidden inside an empty one. He had this long black hair, and snake eyes, and they were purple around for some reason, and he was all in white. Faded white, not bright new bride on her wedding day white, I would have seen that. It was like a long robe, I couldn't see his feet. And the stuffed snake toy was white with a few black stripes and almost large enough for it to drag even when he carried it on his shoulder. Almost. It had to be seriously pushing the upper limits of comfortable there. Hidan looked like he was trying to think of anything more, but didn't find anything. And that was all that happened. That good. Most everyone had lain their cards down on the table and paid full attention as he told the story, and the others were holding onto their cards out of reflex as they did so. As the silence dragged on, eyes shifted to Conan. Itachi activated the Sharingan again. It was good for so many things. With it, he analyzed her facial expression. Some muscles twitched near her jaw, revealing that she wanted to say something but was holding back. Some other muscles twitched that would have pulled her lips into a smile. Whatever it was that she was reacting to, Hidan's description had evidently been much more important to her than to anyone else. What wasn't she saying? Hidan felt a flicker of the same giving of the mind that had made her laugh insanely earlier, and was quite worried. Conan, everything okay? This is bad. Conan thought she might have some understanding now of how the clones had felt when she brought out her jutsu and smashed their perception of their world to pieces. This time, it was her world being smashed to pieces. What was more, it was also the world she had convinced them to trust in. The feeling of unreality probably hid her emotions from Hidan, but she was well aware that a good emotion to be feeling at this moment was fear. If I tell them I was wrong, they will not trust me ever again. She pulled a thick cover across that part of her mind, stilled her body, and lied right to Hidan's face. Yes. Everything's fine. I was just surprised at that description. I think I have met these two children before as well. Hidan sat upright. You too. Hold a sec. Did you meet them, or did they meet you? The second. Why? Conan wasn't sure whether or not she was surprised by Hidan's ability to grasp the difference. Hidan blew a raspberry at Kakuzu again. That's just what I've been trying to get Kakuzu to understand. I'm not a pedo or anything. I'm not looking for little kids to hang out with, they just find me. The demon kid probably finds me extra interesting, and I don't know enough about the snake kid to say for sure, but I am kinda known for helping people who just want someone to understand. If anybody else comes to town, they'll probably find me too. Nagato jerked. Demon kid. Why do you call him that? Kisame found himself roped into the conversation, for once. Does that have anything to do with what you said earlier about having to watch your mind around him? Sasori sighed. Please tell me that's just a creative nickname. I've never been religious before, and I don't have any desire to start now. I would be very happy if you kept demons and angels out of what we're expected to be doing here. Yahiko wondered aloud, does that mean there are angels around here? I would love to meet one. Maybe the other. Deidara interrupted with a worrying tone in his voice. Is he dangerous? You said he wouldn't kill anyone, but there's a lot of room below that, yeah. And what was that about our minds? Sounds like we should stay away from him. Hidan shook his head. There is no staying away from him. He shows up where he wants. And no, seriously, I meant it. He doesn't like to cripple people for life or anything if that's what you're afraid of. Yahiko brightened. So we should try to be friendly or at least ally with him then. I mean, if we can't fight him, that's really the only option, right? He looked around eagerly for support. Sasori sighed again. You're all getting in over your heads. What kind of demon is he? Sasori didn't usually like to, but this was the sort of claim that begged for finger quotes. Kakuzu pointed out, maybe if you all stopped talking you'd get some answers. Does he want anything from us? Why would he want anything from us? Even if he's not a friendly one, at least he'd be so much more than us regular people that he wouldn't be able to like anything we had, right? Believe it or not, Prince, there are a lot of people in the world that like to do bad things just for the fun of doing them. You always need to keep your eyes out for people like that. Everyone return your cards. Itachi wins. Don't talk to him like that. That was a good argument earlier. What could we find out about our situation with a demon helping us? What makes you think he knows anything? Did our originals world have demons? He probably didn't come from there, so what would he know? Yeah. And what does this other kid have to do with it? Does he know the demon boy? They could be working together. Maybe they want something out of Hidan, or out of all of us. I wouldn't trust either of them. Nobody here knows what they are talking about. What are we even talking about? What happened with this kid earlier? Conan placed her hand firmly on Hidan's head and pressed down, stopping the flow of questions. Some glares were shot at the last second, but their ninja heritage kicked in. She was already a little proud of that. I refused to stay up all night debating the possibilities. That said, she launched into a full description from the moment she and Hidan had stopped before the ruined portion of road. All enmity disappeared by the time she was finished describing the hospital and grounds. The room hushed as even little movements and fidgeting stopped, all energy being devoted to taking mental notes instead. She could have sworn even the wind and the building itself were dead silent as she finished with their actual meeting with the boy. A leaf against a window could have been heard in the silence that followed. Nagato raised his hand. Yes. He cleared his throat. I've put together a list of everything that matters about that story right now. I also don't want to stay up forever, so, 1. Overflow's a strange name. 2. We need a full report on his abilities. 3. It sounds like he's been really existing here, in this world, really living a life here for a long time. How long? 4. It sounds like he was telling the truth about being a demon. That or some other supernatural entity. And 5. Sounds like we should help him. If we're the next most interesting thing and that's what happens to everything around him, we should help him stay there at the hospital and not move anywhere near us. It doesn't sound like he has any company. Counting him as an ally could be a good idea. Conan tapped Hidan on the head again. You are directing me to the nearest place to buy a calendar tomorrow morning. A calendar? Why? So I can count how many days it takes to realize that Nagato used to be the leader of the Akatsuki. Never mind. Lady wants a calendar, lady gets a calendar, I guess. Shouldn't be long now. She nodded at Nagato and left the room. The redhead looked around, puzzled. Hidan, do you know what that meant? Hidan smirked. I felt very impressed. It was a good nod. She thinks you're cool. Nagato blushed faintly. She was impressed with me. Wow, I haven't stood out so much before, to anyone. Maybe I was just meant to be a ninja. Yahiko shrugged. Everyone thinks that. Maybe your original was in charge or something before. You do speak better than I do, it has to be. Nagato got up from his seat in a hurry and turned to leave. Maybe. That'd make sense, if I was in charge of something. Never thought about it before. I should get to bed. He thinks I'm that impressive. Yahiko. Sasori mentally drew a string between two seemingly unrelated events. Interesting. When Yahiko speaks, both Nagato and Conan have to get away. He says he is bad at speaking, but his words clearly have power. She said some of us have characteristics that are very different from regular people. Maybe Yahiko has a special voice-based power. He wasn't the only one wondering this, though he was the only one putting such a positive spin on it. Yahiko did not miss the purpose of Nagato's movement. He looked down. Is there something wrong with me? Hidan wanted to reassure his new friend, but couldn't think of how to do so without revealing shit that was really none of his business. It was Nagato's business, but he wouldn't say a thing right now, and it would take a while to convince him to. If people just talked more, I wouldn't have to choose. How can I? Nobody was really interested in cards anymore, and it was getting late. The accumulated feeling of pressure on his eyelids from everyone there made Hidan want to just slump forward and go to sleep immediately. He tried to keep them open and think of things. As everyone else was leaving, he thought of a way out. With some effort he got to his feet and pulled on Yahiko's sleeve just as the other man was leaving, jolting him out of his low mood. Sunshine. Hey, what is it? I don't know what's going on with Conan, but I saw Nagato when I said Conan thought he was cool. He turned a little red. Doesn't look like he's used to people thinking he's amazing. He didn't leave because of anything you did, it was just that you said everyone thought that. That was a good kind of running away, not anything like I could feel you thinking just now. Don't feel sad, Sunshine. A smile spread across Yahiko's lips, turning his whole face from downcast to beaming. Hidan. Thank you. He opened his eyes after a few moments and released Hidan from the reflex hug. I'm glad Conan invited us all here and I met you. Hidan looked Yahiko up and down with as much of an assessing gaze as he could have. Is that good or bad? He mumbled. Is what good or bad? Hidan smiled sheepishly. Just wondering whether you do that with Nagato too, or if I'm just special. Yahiko laughed. Of course I'll hug him too. It's just that we've been together so long, I don't need to. I wouldn't need to tell him I'm glad I know him, he already knows. Hidan stared. Okay. How the air you still single? Hidan shrugged to mask the fact that there was only so much he was willing or able to tell this man who trusted him with pretty much everything. Even with little to no practice hiding guilty feelings, he was able to manage. The only reason you don't speak as well as you want is because your face makes up for all that and more. You like to take care of people, you are handsome as shit, insert a whole other list of positive things here. Why the haven't you met someone who liked you and you liked them back before now? I see no reason at all. Yahiko flushed. Well, it just, I don't know, hasn't happened. Hidan sighed. Shame. Maybe now you're doing different things, your luck'll change. Yahiko nodded. That would be really really good. But, what did you mean with my face? Hidan could feel a dragging influence almost literally pulling him backward from everyone else going to sleep. Ask Nagato. I can't. G-Night. Yahiko helped him stumble to his room, and was delighted to discover that Hidan's room had soft carpeting. It would make a good place to sit and plan things and talk, he thought as he lowered Hidan to the floor. We could all spend time together, the three of us. I'd really like that. How does he lie down? Yahiko rightly figured that Hidan might be more disturbed by his scythe being taken away than he would by anything else and lowered Hidan onto the carpet on his belly. We could be true friends. Hidan was already mostly asleep. His movements as he pulled his hands up to surround his head were stiff and slow. Yahiko grabbed a blanket from the bed and covered him. Hidan purred, already seemingly in the middle of a good dream. Yahiko was careful to shut the door with the softest of clicks as he left. No, I'm wrong. We already are true friends. He had never been happier to be wrong in his life as he quietly walked away to the room he'd chosen as his own. Yahiko. He rode high in the branches of a sunflower. Light glinted off its petals, solar power fueling its steady journey. He wondered why he'd been assigned a vehicle best described as steady for his race. As he had every 2 seconds since the race started, he rubbed his hands behind the nearest pedal and urged, "Can we go any faster? I'm going to lose." He'd managed to sneak a wire under the tail of Nagato's elk, giving himself a little boost, but he felt bad for this and it really wasn't giving him enough of a boost anyway. The wire stretched beyond its limits until it stretched no more, and Yahiko started to cry. He knew what he was doing. He'd always known. What kind of person could he be? He reached forward, trying to cut the link, trying to be a good person, but the wire refused to cut. The sunflower wasn't even moving any faster. Why? Why had he ever thought of doing this? The wire responded to nothing. He sat back against a soft golden petal and continued to cry. A woodpecker drilled him out of his thoughts. He barely managed to stay on his leaf. Turning in fear, he saw a woodpecker drilling its way through the sunflower just beneath the flower. Its beak rattled, making the sound of an artillery burst. Yahiko got up and started towards it, trying to drive it away. He would lose for sure if the flower was burst. He was too late. The sunflower had already started to deflate, the leaf he was on shriveling, the leaf stem connecting it to the main stem narrowing. He looked up in terror. He hadn't realized he was so far below the flower before. How stupid could he be? He ran, racing across the leaf towards the leaf stem. The leaf stem was so thin now, so thin. Yahiko carefully placed his feet as he edged his way slowly across it. He was too slow. He would fall. He knew this and tried to edge faster. The stem dried to a thin line. He balanced like an expert tightrope walker. The light turned red, then darkened into night as the stem ceased to exist beneath him. The woodpecker rattled off another artillery burst so loud the entire world must have shook, a sound that tossed Yahiko back and forth in the air. He flailed against the waves, held his breath to keep from drowning. He couldn't hold his breath for more than 2 seconds before it gave out and rushed out of his lungs without his permission. This was it, the end. The woodpecker rattled again, nearly smashing his bones to pieces. How could it? Yahiko tried to reach for the bird but couldn't. His right hand would not move. The wire wrapped around it too tightly. Yahiko looked up to a shimmering light. The shimmering light seemed to reflect an image of his childhood home. He was a moron. He owned that bird. He'd been responsible for training it. Conan would never forgive him, never respect him now. How would he explain himself? She would surely cut him on the cheek for this. He gasped for air, wishing for just one more breath. It came easily, and another. Too easily. The air seemed more airy, somehow. Yahiko stretched his arms and opened his eyes. It was just a dream. Just a dream. Still he shivered. It was dark early morning. He didn't want to check his phone for what time it was, knowing that the sudden light would burn his eyes. Instead he pulled the covers over himself, turned on his right side. Was that what other people meant when they talked about nightmares? He wasn't feeling horrified, really, just a little empty. He was very sure he knew what the dream meant. It wasn't something he wanted to think about very much, and he didn't believe talking about it would bring any results. Best to just not think of it. Still, the feelings from the dream continued to bother him. Yahiko got up, rubbed his eyes and checked his phone. It was a little before 4 in the morning. Now that he was committed to being fully awake, the fear and other things fell off like unneeded hair. His stomach woke up too, and Yahiko rubbed it with a small smile. He wondered who, if any of them, had a vehicle that could transport a refrigerator all the way out here. Someone would probably get one today, since they'd all pretty much agreed to stay. A small sound, like someone bumping the wall with their knee carelessly, came from the wall to his right. It was the one he shared with Nagato. Yahiko unconsciously focused, and was able to discern some noise. He wondered what Nagato could be dreaming about and hoped it wasn't like his own. His stomach issued another complaint, and Yahiko tilted forward and stood up slowly. He'd have to go back to his regular place and get breakfast. To that end, he slipped out the door as quietly as he could, and tried not to disturb anyone as he walked down the hall. Thanks to Hidan pointing it out before, he could be quite sure driving away would not disturb anyone. Hey, think of the devil. He saw a flash of white out of the corner of his eye and turned in time for Hidan to catch up with him. He whispered as quietly as he was able, "Hey. You're awake too." Hidan rubbed his eyes. "Thanks to you, yeah. Anything you want to talk about?" Yahiko thought of the dream. He supposed it was a good idea to talk about things sometimes just to get them off your chest, and Hidan was good for that. Yet, no, not yet I mean. Hidan covered his mouth as he yawned. "MK. Just so you know, I'm inventing a policy right now that if my sleep is messed with by the same person 3 nights in a row, I get to demand some small fraction of whatever the is going on. Even if literally all you can say is that you're scared and want your mommy. No offense. I just thought less than 5 seconds ago that that would be a good policy, so congratulations, you get to be the one to announce it." Yahiko nodded. "Thanks for the honor. I don't think I'll have to confess anything. It's nothing that bad. Better not be. Thank you, anyway." Hidan gestured at himself. "We kinda had more important things to talk about last night, so I don't have a grudge against anyone for not commenting on my amazing new outfit. It would have been nice to be conscious enough to take it off before, but thanks for at least waking me up this early so I don't do any more damage." Yahiko smiled at him. "It looks very nice. Go eat something. Now I'm hungry." "Yeah, we should get a fridge in here, shouldn't we?" Hidan mentioned how he and Kakuzu had thought of that the day before he had accidentally revealed that things weren't quite as anyone thought. "Whoops. But yeah, we were kinda thinking before that of how Kakuzu's truck is pretty big, so I figured we would be the ones to get it. I'm gonna have to dig up a treasure chest or 2 to pay for it anyway, so what do I care?" "Treasure chest? What are you saying with that?" Hidan lifted his fingers to count. "Step 1. Acquire a shit ton of money. Step 2. Bury it 6 feet under. Step 3. Try to remember where you put it." He hemmed in thought and muttered, "That last one's the hardest." Yahiko's stomach rumbled again. Hidan glared at him and said, "You better not have given my stomach any ideas." Then he turned away and wandered down the hall, pausing at the corner. Yahiko heard him mutter, "So do I be a total perv and spy on some more good dreams, or go back to bed?" Before he left, he wondered on his way out just what kind of life Hidan had. He's so, I don't think weird's the right word. Disjointed, maybe. How exactly is he? Sasori. His alarm clock made a ticking sound, a sound like the tapping of some small thing's clawed feet against wood. That was in fact the exact video he had used to program the alarm function. He no longer remembered whether inspiration had struck before or after, or if it was a lucky guess. No matter. The sound was very effective. Sasori opened his eyes and reached out a hand, softly pressing the button on his phone's screen to turn it off. He lay there for a few more minutes looking at the light before sitting up. There wasn't any concrete reason to get up on the weekends at this time. He had no responsibilities, no social appointments, no daily regimen. And yet, he was an engineer. Like father, like son, like author, like creation. Even the wildest partier would have to admit this did do wonders for his daily efficiency. When there was no reason to be getting up, one had to be invented. He recalled all he could about yesterday's considerations, and walked over to the desk on the opposite side of the room. The single sheet of paper inside it contained a crude blueprint that nobody else could have deciphered, as drawn and redrawn as it had been, several similar sketches, and a list of basic materials that he was sure to need no matter what. In the privacy of his own room, he smiled. A space for me and my own things, finally. Did I want that before? The fact that he was reflexively smiling seemed undeniable proof that he had in fact wanted his own space before. Good to find out now instead of later. I should only hope that everything I'm hiding from me can be discovered in such a timely fashion. On the reverse side of the sheet he'd done some calculations of how much he would have to spend for the basic materials alone, along with a price range for the materials he couldn't quantify until he finished his blueprint. He imagined showing the paper to some money-minded person, watching the expression on their face. Not a bad idea, if I bring Didera and a camera along with me. That was a silver lining to the thick, stormy mass of cloud that the numbers represented. Sasori continued to sit, his eyes staring at nothing in particular. How am I going to afford this? I don't get paid that much, don't have anything significant saved up, and I most definitely do not want to start out by indebting myself to everyone in this entire building. He wondered how Conan would react to the news that he was going to have to delay making anything. Sasori realized with a jolt that he was now looking firmly at the ground, face drawn and throat feeling a little constricted. I must have been really looking forward to making something impressive. This hurts. Why? There was a knock on the door. Sasori composed himself and called, "Come in." It was strange enough that anyone would want to disturb him at this early time, since Didera had a much different schedule. His eyes widened even more when he saw that it wasn't Didera, it was Hidan. Him. Why is he bothering me now? Sasori couldn't think of any business they had unresolved. Hidan leaned against the opposite wall next to the door. If even there goes my weekend. Sasori replied, "What do you mean by that?" Hidan groused for a few seconds before sighing. "You've heard of my issue, right?" Issue? He hasn't mentioned any problems. No, I do not believe I have. Hidan scratched his head, puzzled. Could have sworn Conan had to make some mention of it last night when she was telling y'all about our adventures and shit. But anyway, the issue is that I can feel what any kind of feeling being around me feels. That's an issue because this is the second time this morning that I've been disturbed by people. I'm strongly reminded of why I didn't sleep near other people before. I don't want to have this same problem again, so could you please get out with it? If you feel like it, of course. His vocabulary made it sound like more of a problem than his face did. He folded his arms across his chest and waited patiently, no trace of more than mild annoyance in his expression. Something in Sasori's guts tingled. He had no idea if it was bad tingling or good tingling. Do I like having people worry about me or not? He'd never thought about the possibility of other people being concerned about him before, so he couldn't say. Was that unusual? He decided now was not the time to wonder about that. Now was the time to be solving problems. He cleared his throat. In order to build something like what Conan suggested, I am going to need a lot more money than I can possibly get. I may never be able to build anything impressive. I think I was looking forward to. I wanted to. Not to mention she'll be disappointed. The mere mention of it brought the feeling back. Sasori's throat constricted again. What is wrong with me? I'm getting worked up for nothing. Or, is this the sort of thing people should get worked up for? He blinked away any sudden blurry spots that may have appeared in his vision and looked at Hidan. Hidan scratched his head. He said nothing for a few moments. Then, before Sasori knew it, Hidan was sitting on the bed next to him giving him a sideways hug. What the it felt kind of nice. This is not what I signed up for. Sasori was only tense for a few seconds before relaxing. Okay, get off now. It really did feel nice. Hidan didn't let go then, holding it for a few more seconds until just before Sasori would have started to feel really uncomfortable. Then he unwrapped his arms from Sasori's shoulders and sat back. Hidan explained, I suck at talking about feelings. I am amazing at doing body actions about feelings. Sorry. Did it work? Sasori noted that the tightness had gone and he did feel more relaxed overall. Seems like it did. Cool shit. Hidan clapped his hands. I have good news. Seeing Sasori's eyes shift to his, he grinned. I'm pretty sure I have enough treasure chests to cover whatever you need. You don't have to worry about shit. Sasori found himself looking at Hidan in a way he had not looked at him before. You have treasure chests. Hidan's grin dropped. What the is it with you people? Yes, I have treasure chests. People pay me in physical money. I don't spend it on shit. My wallet only has so much space in it. Therefore, I buy a metal box and bury the shit when I run out of space. What the else am I supposed to do? I don't know anybody who needs money that badly. He paused, and smiled. Well, now I do, I guess. Metal boxes suck, and I worry about them rusting and all that shit just being wasted. You have no idea how stressful it is to worry about that. He started bouncing a little and looked at Sasori with pleading eyes. You'll take some of it so I don't have to be concerned, right? Please. Sasori's mouth was hanging open. What sort of being is this? He can't be human. No human cares about money that little. He must be. Sasori couldn't think of anything. What are you? Hidan was still pleading, so Sasori took the easy way out. Sure. I would be happy to take your excess money off your hands. Hidan grinned at least as wide as Yahiko had ever done. Awesome. Shit. Thank you. You know how my memory sucks, right? Like I said to Kakuzu yesterday. Yeah, it sucks even worse to try to remember where it's all buried. You're a minsaver. Again Sasori found himself pulled into a hug. Well, that was a thing to consider. You do remember where it's buried, right? Sasori asked as he patted Hidan's back awkwardly. Hidan released him from the death hug. Yeah, most of it. Yahiko mentioned how we need to get a fridge for this place so we can eat, so I started thinking of it then. By now I've remembered a good bunch of them. The rest'll probably come back once I'm out there again. He looked proud of himself, like a child that has earned a great privilege. He seems to get along well with Deidara. They probably have a lot in common. Maybe. Sasori smiled and inquired, do you by any chance know someone who values having a lot of money? Hidan's eyes grew wide. And a camera. And would you mind bringing Deidara along? Hidan had started nodding at a pace that would make the springiest bobblehead on the market jealous by the first word. I have a sheet right here where I figured out how much money I would need as a bare minimum, you see, and I guesstimated a range of cost I would need for the materials to put something together, so that in everything you just said to me about your treasure chests, Hidan fell off the bed and smacked his head painfully against the floor. Sasori wondered if he'd gone too far. Are you? Yes. Sasori flinched back out of a deeply buried, impossible to overcome primal reflex of the sort that urged his distant ancestors out of the path of dinosaur stampedes and lava flows. Okay. He squeaked. Hidan's head appeared over the edge of the bed as if he was playing peek-a-boo. His eyes turned towards Sasori with a hunger in them. Sasori tried not to make any sudden movements as he handed over the sheet. Hidan looked it up, down, and backwards, working out precisely which number was which. Hee. Yes. Oh yes. Ahaha. Ahahaha. Sasori thought that, if the demon boy was being friendly now, Hidan would also get along well with him. Oh, Sasori. You have no idea. Just Hidan's feral grin seemed ready to take a bite out of some small creature that probably resembled Sasori's most distant mammalian ancestors that had lived alongside dinosaurs. No worries, I'll bring it back, the last few words he said in almost a sing-song voice, before getting up and dancing out of the room. Sasori sat for a while longer wondering what he'd done.